Chapter 725. The good news was that Jianghu wanted to expand the ocean. The state approved it, but the price was not cheap. To be honest, the sea in Winthrop did not have any so-called private fishing grounds. What was different from domestic fish farms was that in China, fish farms were basically farmed fish. If you farmed fish, it would naturally be your territory. If others came to fish it, it would definitely not be allowed. But in foreign countries, basically no one farmed fish. All the fish were wild. If you wanted to catch it, others could also catch it. Unless it was the kind of island owner who bought the island, he would have a specific fishing area that belonged to him. The original fishing area of Jianghu's manor was a gift when he bought this land, but he did not expect it to be so valuable now. Since Jianghu wanted to buy the sea now, the state of Massachusetts naturally had no reason to disagree. Agreeing to sell the sea was good news, but what the Massachusetts government asked for was neither good nor bad news. Because although they agreed to sell the sea, they did not plan it according to square kilometers, acres, or nautical miles. They directly designated the area outside Jianghu's original sea area as the territory that Jianghu wanted to buy. If it was calculated according to square kilometers, it would be about 20,000 square kilometers. What a joke! Jianghu's sea area was larger than the urban area of Beijing. It was nearly 200 kilometers wide and nearly 100 kilometers deep. According to Jianghu's ship, it could run 24 knots per hour at full speed. 1 knot was equivalent to 1 nautical mile. 1 nautical mile was equivalent to 1,852 kilometers, which was equivalent to less than 50 kilometers per hour. If it kept going forward, Jianghu would need more than an hour to sail out of his own fishing ground. This time, if he wanted to sail to the end, well, it would take more than 3 hours. And this was just sailing in a straight line. What if it was a patrol? Then it might really be a little troublesome. Thinking of this, Jianghu could not help but pat his forehead. Actually, it's not that bad. If you really don't lack money, you can give it a try. That's because there's a part of the sea that used to belong to Cape Cod. Every year, a large number of tunas gather there. There are both bluefin and yellowfin tunas. This can be considered compensation. Seeing that Jianghu was a little hesitant, Mayor Wallace was also a little embarrassed. Originally, Jianghu only wanted to buy about 5,000 square kilometers of sea area, which was the sea area outside their fishing ground. But now, there was an additional circle, but this circle was 3 or 4 times the size of the original fishing ground. It would also cost a lot of money to transform these areas. How much does the state want? And how do they protect my rights and interests? After thinking for a while, Jianghu asked Mayor Wallace. The state also knows that it is indeed a little difficult for you to buy such a large fishing ground, so they said that if you buy it, they will give you $10,000 per square kilometer, and they want you to pay in 1 lump sum. If you pay in 1 lump sum, they can fight for some benefits for you. For example, you can reduce all taxes on fishing for 3 years. You don't need to pay taxes on buying boats and selling fish. If you buy fish seedlings and aquatic plants, they can provide you with a 5-year interest-free loan, plus a 5% refund. They will set up a Coast Guard station near you to strengthen coastal patrols to ensure the safety of your fishing ground. Hearing Jianghu's probing words, Mayor Wallace hesitated for a moment before speaking. But after hearing his words, Jianghu's eyes instantly lit up. $10,000 per square kilometer, this price was indeed a little high. If it was in the Gulf of Mexico, $3,000, no, $1,000 per square kilometer, no one would think that it was expensive, especially since this was the sea and not the land. If it was in Winthrop's territory, $10,000 per square kilometer would definitely be a cheap price, but it wasn't too valuable on the sea. And most importantly, it was 20,000 square kilometers. $10,000 would be $200 million. Most importantly, it would be a lump sum. $200 million, this was US dollars. For Jianghu, this was a little painful. Of course, the only thing they could reduce was the state tax. He couldn't reduce the 37% national tax, but even if he didn't want the state tax, Jianghu could still save a lot of money. That was 5%. Jianghai's income from fishing this year alone would be more than $2 billion. Even if it was 5%, it would still be $100 million. With 3 years of tax relief, even if Jianghai didn't invest, he could still make it cheaper in these 3 years. He had spent $200 million on the land, and it would be $300 million cheaper in 3 years. This was definitely a good thing. And most importantly, after Jianghai buys the sea, he will certainly plant seaweed and raise fish seedlings. After planting the seaweed seed and raising the fish seedlings, Jianghai will be able to use it. Then, would he still make the same amount of money next year, or the year after? Would he be able to earn more? If his business became $4 billion a year, it would be equivalent to saving $200 million. If it became $6 billion, it would be equivalent to saving $300 million. In an instant, Jianghai's eyes lit up. He wasn't stupid. He knew how to calculate. This wasn't good news, but it was definitely good news for Jianghai. Thinking of this, he immediately called Moses Adams. Tomorrow, they were going to knock this thing out. Are you really going to buy it? That's 20,000 square kilometers. Hearing Jianghai's call, Mayor Wallace was a little confused. $200 million, plus the money for development, would be almost $200 million. Did Jianghai just agree? It's okay. There's an old saying in Wuxia, you can't catch the wolf without sacrificing the child. I know. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghai put down his phone with a smile. This was a big deal. Why wouldn't he agree? Okay, then let's talk about the land. This is the bad news. Hearing that Jianghai was determined to buy it, Mayor Wallace didn't persuade him. He also knew that it was useless to persuade him, because Jianghai knew what he was doing. Jianghai wasn't as stupid as they thought. When they first learned that someone had spent $300 million to buy this manor, they all said, "Who's crazy to buy this thing? Isn't this just waiting to lose money?" But now? Who would say such a thing? Everyone knew that Jianghai made more than $1 billion a year. Now that he spent $200 million to buy the sea, who knows if he has a better way to make money? It was said that he made a lot of money at the fish industry exhibition a while ago, and he sent out fish every day. But obviously, they didn't know that Jianghai's real big money wasn't these fish. After confirming this matter, Mayor Wallace shut his mouth. What's the bad news? Tell me about it. Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghai thought for a while and asked him. If he called it bad news, it seemed that it might not be easy to deal with. I've basically asked those families on the land, but to be honest, none of them are sure to sell. First, it's because now that Winthrop is developing, they can see that their land will be valuable in the future. So, even if the manor wasn't very profitable, they didn't intend to sell it. Second, it seems that one of them is also buying this land. Looking at Jianghai, Mayor Wallace said seriously. Someone wants to buy this land? Who is it? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghai frowned. He knew the first point, but he didn't care because he had money. These manor owners just wanted to use the land in their hands to exchange for some money. The inheritance tax in the United States was extremely heavy, and consumption was encouraged here, so 70% of normal Americans carried some kind of debt. After the old people died, their children didn't have the money to inherit these houses and the debts. When the time came, they would still have to sell it. Now that Jianghai directly offered a high price, he could basically buy it all. At most, he could ask for 20% more. He could earn it back anyway. If these manors were combined, if he bought them at 120% of the market price, it would only cost him more than $50 million. And these lands combined were more than 3 times larger than Jianghai's manor. In these places, Jianghai could sell grass for $1 billion a year. Therefore, even if he increased the price by 10%, he would still be able to afford it. However, when someone raised the price with him, Jianghai was somewhat surprised. Who is raising the price? Do they also want to buy land? In the United States, land was actually worthless. Maybe it was because of the different consumption concepts. In the United States, things like houses and land were indeed not very valuable, and not many people would buy them. It seems to be the Cartwright Company. They also want to buy these lands. Seeing Jiang Hai ask, Mayor Wallace hesitated and said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also understood. He instantly remembered what Gladstone Narja said a few days ago. It seemed that the Cartwright Company and some Japanese society wanted to mess with him. It seemed that they wanted to set up a new farm next to him. This was also their plan, but Jiang Hai was not afraid of this kind of competition. If they had the ability, let them come. Tomorrow, let's go to the sea area to sign the contract, and then I will personally go to these houses to ask. Making up his mind, Jiang Hai smiled at Mayor Wallace, and then said very clearly. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Mayor Wallace would not say much. After all, this was Jiang Hai's business. Jiang Hai would settle this matter, which was inevitable. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace went to Boston. Today, Moses Adams learned that Jiang Hai had a big business. Naturally, he did not dare to delay and came to the company early. After Jiang Hai arrived, he immediately went downstairs and followed Jiang Hai to the Massachusetts government. The situation in foreign governments was not the same as in China. In the United States or Europe, foreign governments were very cowardly. Not to mention rich people, even if they saw ordinary people, they had to smile. If they wanted to go to the toilet or something, they could go to the city hall. No one would stop them. If this was in China, even if Jiang Hai was a person with tens of billions of yuan, not to mention a mayor, even if he saw an office director, secretary, or something, Jiang Hai would have to bow his head and smile. This was the essential difference between the official standard and the gold standard. After Jiang Hai came here, he explained his purpose. Immediately, the highest official in charge of land management in Massachusetts met with Jiang Hai. After discussing the benefits in detail, there was nothing more to say. The city naturally had lawyers for legal matters, and Jiang Hai handed it over to Moses Adams. Moses Adams was very capable. Not only did he protect Jiang Hai for 3 years, but he also protected the benefits of fishing taxes. Moreover, he also increased the subsidies for fish seedlings from the original 5% to 8%. Although it was only a small amount, Jiang Hai liked to take advantage of this. After everything was discussed, Jiang Hai signed a contract with the City Hall. Then, Jiang Hai directly transferred $200 million to the Massachusetts Government Bank. Since then, the large sea area outside Jiang Hai's manor had become Jiang Hai's backyard. It was really a large territory. After negotiating the biggest deal, Jiang Hai also invited Moses Adams and Mayor Wallace to have a meal as a small celebration. Then, Moses Adams went back to work. As for Jiang Hai, he returned to Winthrop. After sending Mayor Wallace home, he thought for a moment about who he should visit. After all, he was about to go to Europe. If he came back and found that the land next to his house had been bought by the Cartwright Company, he would probably feel as disgusted as if he had eaten a fly. However, although he had met the people in the neighborhood, his relationship with them was not particularly good. The only one he had a good relationship with was probably Old George's family. After all, he had bought horses there, and Old George's daughter. So, after thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to go to Old George's place first. Given their friendship, it was unlikely that Old George would fool him. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai started the engine and drove his battle shield to Bob George's horse farm. As soon as the car stopped, he saw Delia George walk out of the house from a distance. When she saw that it was Jiang Hai's car, a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. She immediately ran over from outside the villa and leaned against the door to look at Jiang Hai. Chapter 726. You're acting like we're having a private meeting. After parking the car outside the door, Jiang Hai also jumped out of the car. Looking at Delia's appearance behind the iron gate, he couldn't help but chuckle. Why does it look like a movie? I'm not here for a date. Hee, we're having a private meeting. Why are you here? Delia looked at Jiang Hai with a smile and said playfully. Don't think that she was old just because she worked, but in fact, she was really young. After all, she was only 19 years old this year. In the UA, there was no such thing as a fake age. They all talked about one's birthday, and one's birthday did not count as one's age. It was not as messy as China's age system. Therefore, Delia was really a little girl at this time. It was true that she was young and beautiful. Although her private life was a bit casual, this was the case in the UA, so she was still considered good. Seeing Jiang Hai walk over, Delia also opened the iron gate and said to Jiang Hai, "I'm here to find your dad." "Is he not here?" "There's a family in town whose horse is sick. He went to take a look. He should be back in a while. Come in and sit down, I'll call him." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia also smiled at Jiang Hai, then led Jiang Hai into the small mansion. After letting Jiang Hai sit on the sofa to rest, she picked up her phone and called her father, Bob George. "I have some bad news for you. He may not be back in an hour." After putting down the phone, Delia curled her lips and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also thought for a moment. "An hour? It's not impossible to wait, then I'll wait for him for a while. Since it's not that he doesn't want to see me, Jiang Hai can wait for a while. Then what can we do in this 1 hour? We can't keep watching TV." Hearing that Jiang Hai was going to wait, Delia also came over and whispered while blinking her eyes. Listening to her words, Jiang Hai knew what she wanted to do. Sure enough, before Jiang Hai could resist, she had already pounced over and kissed Jiang Hai heavily on the mouth. Her hands were also restless. It seemed that this hour wouldn't be too idle. An hour passed in the blink of an eye, and Jiang Hai and Delia were also lying on the sofa, sweating. Delia leaned into Jiang Hai's arms, and the two were connected in some indescribable places. Closing her eyes and feeling the places Jiang Hai touched, Delia's face showed a smile. To be honest, she really liked Jiang Hai, but only for his money and body. Jiang Hai's personality, in the eyes of a pure American like her, was really not very likable. He was too passive. Such a guy was good to play with, but he was far from being a partner. Of course, the most important thing was that she also understood that Jiang Hai would never treat her as a partner. "Phew, I really love you." Raising her head and looking at the comfortable Jiang Hai in front of her, Delia smiled and kissed Jiang Hai's chest, then said slowly. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also smiled awkwardly. What else could he say about such a topic? Huff huff. At this moment, the sound of an old pickup engine starting came from outside the door. Hearing this sound, Delia's expression changed instantly because she was quite familiar with this sound. "Hurry up and get up, my dad is back. If you don't want to try his double-barreled shotgun, then hurry up and put on your clothes. Oh, and the smell in this room, oh my God, it's terrible." Delia grew up listening to the sound of pickup trucks like this. She knew better than anyone what her dad's car sounded like. Now that the engine sounded, she was sure that her dad must be back. When Jiang Hai heard her words, he immediately jumped up from the sofa and quickly put on his clothes. Fortunately, it was the end of April, and the weather was good and not cold, so Jiang Hai didn't wear much. In addition to his underwear, he only wore a pair of slightly thick outdoor pants, a sweater, and an outdoor jacket. That was all. Compared to Jiang Hai's clothes, Delia's clothes were much more troublesome, especially the vest, which had to be buttoned up one by one. Jiang Hai put on his clothes in a dozen seconds and then began fanning the air in the room with a cushion, hoping that the air would disperse faster. But at this moment, Delia's father had already gotten out of the car and walked into the manor. "It's too late, hurry up." At this moment, Delia had finally finished putting on her clothes. She looked around and saw that the smell was still quite strong. She quickly ran upstairs and quickly took down some flowers. Then, she used a lighter in the room to light them up. In an instant, a very similar smell floated out from the flowers. Ahem, what kind of trick is this? Jiang Hai was still very familiar with this smell after what he had just done. He suddenly smelled it again, which made him a little confused. He couldn't help but look at Delia with some surprise. What the hell is this? Shoo. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia couldn't help but gesture and then put the flowers on the table. At this moment, Delia's father, Bob George, walked in from outside. He frowned when he smelled the smell in the room, but after seeing the flowers on the table, he smiled and then looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. Jiang Hai, you're here. What are you standing for? Sit down. Why are you ordering chestnut flowers in broad daylight? The first half of the sentence was said to Jiang Hai, and the second half was said to Delia. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at Delia with some confusion. Isn't it because there are too many mosquitoes here? You didn't change the screens. Really, you have to pay taxes to make so much money, don't you know? Hearing Bob George's words, Delia also complained to him. Hee, isn't that the money I saved for you? If you find a poor man in the future, I can still prepare some dowry for you. Huh, well, in fact, I want to find you a mother as soon as possible. Forget it, Jiang Hai, let's sit and talk. Hearing Delia's words, Bob George didn't take it seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled awkwardly. This guy really dared to say, you sit down first, I'm going to change my clothes. Just now, a horse sold by my horse farm had dysentery. I went to take a look and it was covered in horse feces. The smell is very strong. Maybe he felt that Jiang Hai was still there, so Bob George smiled and then went upstairs to take a shower and change clothes. Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief at this time. What's with this chestnut flower? Pointing to the grass that was still burning, Jiang Hai asked Delia. This thing repels mosquitoes, and the smell is similar to the smell of your thing. When I was young, my parents would use this thing to trick me. TSK, they really think I don't know. Hearing Jiang Hai's inquiry, Delia sat next to Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fortunately, this time, it didn't take long before Bob George went downstairs and changed into casual clothes. Jiang Hai, you've been waiting for a long time. Tell me, what do you want from me? The Americans didn't like to beat around the bush. Therefore, after exchanging some pleasantries, they directly asked Jiang Hai what he was doing here. They wanted to make it clear to him. A few days ago, Mayor Wallace should have asked you about it, right? I want to take all the grasslands in our vicinity. Hearing Bob George's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, both Bob George and Delia looked at Jiang Hai in surprise. They didn't expect the rumor to be true. Americans were different from Wuxia. The Chinese were particular about returning to their roots, home, house, and land. These were all things that could bring a sense of security to Wuxia. If the government or developers wanted to buy them, they could arrange a new place to live. If someone came directly to you and asked you to buy your home, you would probably be kicked out. Just like last time, when Jiang Hai returned to Bing City and bought his home, if it weren't for the fact that he paid a lot of money, his family would have beaten him up. But in the United States, people didn't have a strong sense of dependence on land and home, so they didn't care about these things. So now that Jiang Hai said he wanted to buy their home, George and Delia didn't feel hurt. They were just a little surprised. Because they knew how much land there was in the vicinity, and Jiang Hai wanted to buy all the land? That was an astronomical figure. Ahem, Jiang Hai, are you serious? After thinking for a moment, Bob George asked Jiang Hai seriously. Of course, I am very serious. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then said to him with a serious face. Logically speaking, this is not my ancestral property, so it doesn't matter if I sell it. We have a good relationship, so I'll be honest with you. You know, the town's tourism has been very good recently. My horse farm is a special place for tourism, and the daily income is a lot. So if you want me to sell this place, I'm a little reluctant. After thinking for a moment, Bob George said seriously. I've also thought about this. I'll buy it, only on this side of my manor. I won't buy the land on the other side of the highway. You can move your horse farm there. I think Mayor Wallace will also give you some discounts, and most importantly, my price should be good, Jianghu said to Bob George with a smile. Let's hear it. Hearing Jianghu's words, Bob George didn't mind moving. After all, as Jianghu said, if he only bought this side, it didn't matter. They could move to the opposite side. Let's see if the price was enough to tempt them. The land price in Winthrop is now $1,700 per acre. If I count Winthrop is now a developing area, $2,000 per acre. What do you think? I'll give you another $40,000 for the house. After thinking for a moment, Jianghu looked at Bob George in front of him and said. His horse farm covers a total of 30 acres. $2,000 per acre is only $60,000. Including his house, Jianghu would only give him $100,000. Indeed, in the United States, these places are really cheap. A small horse farm like this, not counting the horses, just the land, a few years ago, it would be lucky to sell for $50,000. So, Jianghu's price was indeed not bad. A horse farm was $100,000, and there were many other manors here. Jianghu's original estimate of $50 million might be a little exaggerated. Jianghu, to be honest, I can't sell at this price. But unfortunately, even if it was $100,000, Bob George still refused after thinking for a moment. Hearing his words, Jianghu didn't say anything, because he knew that Bob would have more to say. To be honest, 2 weeks ago, Cartwright Corporation came here and wanted to buy my manor. They first offered $80,000. After I didn't sell, they came again last week and offered $120,000. Although I don't understand why my land is so valuable, friendship is friendship, money is money. I think you know what I'm talking about. Looking at Jianghu in front of him, Bob George said in a deep voice. Hearing his words, Jianghu was a little surprised. $120,000? This horse farm definitely wasn't worth $120,000. Of course, if the horses were included, $120,000 wouldn't be enough. Bob George's horses alone were worth $200,000. But now, they were talking about the land. 30 acres of land, a small house less than 200 square meters, and a row of stables. It definitely wasn't worth $120,000, but Jianghu was a little surprised that Cartwright Corporation was willing to pay $120,000. Let's not worry about the price. I can give you a bottom line. I can afford more than $120,000, but I'm worried that the people from Cartwright Corporation aren't just after you. How about this, Uncle Bob? If you're willing to believe me, I'll buy your manor for $150,000, but I have one request. You have to take me to meet the other people here. We're all from the same hometown, and I definitely won't let you suffer a loss. Looking at Bob George in front of him, Jianghu weighed it in his mind. In fact, not to mention $50 million, he could even earn $500 million for this land, but he didn't want to be a sucker. At the same time, he also wanted to know what Cartwright Corporation was up to, but he didn't have time to play with him now. Because he was about to go to Europe, he had to reach a consensus with these people before he went there. Before he came back, the land couldn't be sold. Chapter 727. Attention, all passengers. Our plane is about to land at Charles de Gaulle Airport in France. Passengers getting off the plane, please prepare your belongings. A string of French followed by a string of English echoed in the cabin. Jianghu, who was sleeping comfortably in the chair, couldn't help but sit up in a daze. He glanced at Qi Jia, who was still sleeping happily beside him, and couldn't help but gently nudge her and then adjust the chair. Wiping his face, Jianghu also made himself more energetic, and then looked out of the window. Unfortunately, there was nothing outside except clouds. After fastening his seatbelt, Jianghu casually turned on his mobile phone and looked at it. Mobile phones were allowed on foreign flights, but there was no signal in the air, but you could play mobile games and check the time. After confirming the time, he began to ponder. Thinking about his actions yesterday afternoon, he hoped that those people could understand. Yesterday, Jianghu first went to George's horse farm, and then in the afternoon, Jianghu and Bob George went to the nearby manors. Sure enough, in the manors near Jianghu, all the manor owners had been approached by the Cartwright Company. And the price they offered was, to be honest, a little too high, at least about 20% higher. This made Jianghu a little depressed, but he had to spend money to get these places. Not to mention that the original 50 million had become 80 million, even if it became 180 million, he would still buy it. Of course, if it was more expensive, and the other party was willing to pay more than 500 million for these lands, then he didn't mind giving it to them. He made an agreement with them that everything would wait until he came back. Jianghu went back to prepare the things they were going to take with them. Today, they boarded a plane and headed to France. In fact, Jianghu really didn't have a good impression of France. For others, France was a romantic country. In fact, in Jianghu's view, this was a shameless country. Even if it was a marriage between a man and a woman, there was no trace of moral shackles. Often, when people saw each other on the street, they would directly go to a nearby hotel to have a go. Sometimes, when they couldn't hold it in anymore, they would go to the nearby lawn or something. France was the country with the highest rate of having an affair. This was not a joke. Their country was extremely open about things like sex, whether it was men or women, it was the same. Even if they got married, the law didn't specify who was at fault. As long as they got divorced, it was all the man's fault. He had to give the woman money and pay for her care. Therefore, there were many unmarried French men in France, and the women didn't care. Those who were married were also fooling around all over the world. Since men couldn't control women, they would also go out and mess around. It was extremely chaotic. Even between good friends and relatives, that kind of relationship often happened. It was indeed the most secretive country in the world. Most importantly, this country was anti-Chinese. For a patriotic and traditional man like Jianghu, he didn't like the people here. This time, if it wasn't for the banquet, he wouldn't be willing to come. Therefore, even if he came, he didn't intend to stay here for long. After the banquet, they would leave Belgium and not return to France. Hey, wake up, we're here. After Jianghu sorted out his consciousness, he also called the others. Everyone yawned, stretched, and rubbed their eyes to look around. After confirming that they were really about to arrive, everyone relaxed. As the plane slowly landed, Jianghu and the others were ready. After the plane stopped, they walked out of the cabin. However, as soon as they entered the hall, Jianghu and the others attracted a lot of attention. Especially those French men, many of whom couldn't help but whistle. Perhaps in the eyes of these people, Qi Jia, Chia, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunshan looked a little strange because of their different aesthetic standards. However, in these people's eyes, the other women were all beauties. Even Aphrodite and the others were beauties who could score more than 80 points. The most important thing was that their figures weren't ordinary. Their slender waists and plump upper bodies, because they had absorbed a lot of spiritual energy, made their figures comparable to those of supermodels. This made these men, who were in a situation where their hormones were going out of control at any time, quite crazy. But fortunately, they saw Jianghu walking in the middle of the women, and Knerson Peters walking behind him. Coupled with the pistol on his waist, they had no choice but to lower their dopamine levels. After all, no one wanted to have a bloody hole in their body while picking flowers. When these whistles sounded, Jianghu couldn't help but curl his lips. Sure enough, this was an annoying place. But fortunately, this annoyance didn't last long. When they walked out of the airport, Connor Murphy had been waiting outside for a long time. Seeing Jianghu and the others coming out, the Germanic walked over with a straight face. It couldn't be helped. He didn't know if all Germans didn't know how to smile. Connor Murphy really didn't seem to smile much. Even if he did smile sometimes, Jianghu and the others would feel that his smile was very stiff. Maybe this was also the style of Germans. Boss, you're here. Seeing Jianghu coming over with a group of people, Connor Murphy also said seriously. Are the cars and everything ready? This time I brought a total of 10 boxes as per your request. It should be enough. Looking at Connor Murphy, Jiang Hai also smiled and greeted him, and at the same time, he showed the 10 boxes of wine pulled by the trolley behind him. It's enough. Looking at the wine, Connor Murphy also nodded seriously. It was indeed enough. There were 10 bottles of wine in a box, and 10 boxes were 120 bottles. There was no need to bring so many to a wine party. Half of them were to be used at the Brussels wine party in Belgium. The car is here, let's go. After seeing that there was no problem with the wine behind Jiang Hai, Connor Murphy took Jiang Hai and the others to the nearby parking lot. He had already prepared a luxury bus in the parking lot. Of course, this was rented by them. It was impossible for Jiang Hai, the boss, to not use a car, so renting a luxury bus was inevitable. In addition to the car, there was naturally a driver. Looking at the girls getting on the bus, the driver was a little surprised. Although he knew that these people were not people he could afford to offend, it did not prevent him from looking at them with his eyes. After arranging the wine and luggage, everyone got on the bus together. The bus started, and everyone also headed to their destination, Marquette. France was actually not big. Basically, the countries in Europe, except for Soviet Russia, were not big. A country might not even be as big as a province in Wuxia. France was not much different. France was not considered a territory, but its local area was only 550,000 square kilometers. Wuxia's hometown, Black Dragon Province, was 470,000 square kilometers. It was basically not much smaller than France. What's more, Black Dragon Province was not very big in Wuxia. The whole of France was only so big. If you did not divide it into provinces and directly divided it into cities, it would not look big. It did not have the grandeur of a big country at all, so the regional division of France was not the same as Wuxia, the United States, and other big countries. In France, the administrative divisions were called regions. After the regions were the provinces and towns. This time, Jiang Hai and the others were going to the Burgundy region. Speaking of Burgundy, not many people knew about this place. But this place was still very famous in Europe and the United States. This was because when it came to red wine, France was the first place. France had 2 major wine-producing regions. One was Bordeaux, and the other was Burgundy. This time, the Marquette wine competition was held at the southern end of Burgundy. Jiang Hai and the others naturally did not go there by train. It was not too far away. Moreover, the roads in Europe were really good. Although the cities were congested, it was very convenient to leave the city. After setting off from Charles de Gaulle Airport, they quickly got on the highway and headed towards their destination. France was not big, but the population was not small. There were more than 66 million people. Therefore, there was not much natural scenery outside the cities. Because there were too many people, there was not much scenery along the way. But there were many man-made things. For example, there were a lot of ranches and manors. There was a lot of rural scenery, but not much natural scenery. After reaching the Burgundy region, the rural scenery changed. After all, this place relied on selling wine to make a living. Therefore, there were wineries everywhere. There were vineyards outside each of the wineries. Many old vines were glowing at this time. But one had to admit that such a rural scenery was quite good. Burgundy was originally a Germanic tribe. They came from Bornholm Island in the Baltic Sea. Around the end of the Tiger of the century AD, these people came to Europe when the barbarians invaded. In 413 AD, the Burgundians established the first Burgundy kingdom in the upper reaches of the Rhine River. However, in 436 AD, it was destroyed by the Western Roman Empire's general, Taius, and the Huns. But speaking of which, this place has a long history and culture. There are still many fun places in Marquette. Perhaps feeling that the atmosphere was a little dull, Connor Murphy, who was not good with words, coughed softly and said to Jiang Hai and the others. Hearing the history he talked about, Jiang Hai and the others also listened. Jiang Hai was quite interested in history. This Burgundy region could be said to be the root of the establishment of France. It was just that the people in this region were more unlucky. Every time a kingdom was established, it would be destroyed in less than a few decades. After being destroyed, it would be established again, and then destroyed again. After all, it was already established in the 4th century AD. Therefore, to the Burgundians, they also had more than 1,600 years of cultural history. It was just a very weak cultural history. Later on, this country was really a little scared and became a territory of France. It did not matter if it was a duchy or something like that. At least it would not be easily destroyed, right? During the Middle Ages in Europe, England and France were famous for being strong. Even at the beginning of the First World War, France was known as the world's #1 army. At least on the ground, there were not many people who dared to go against them. And this world's #1 army had once lost to the Manchus when they were at their best. But the most depressing thing was that even though they had clearly won, the Manchus still lost money as if they had lost. It really made people a little speechless. While listening to the history of this area, Jiang Hai and the others went to Magan. These few hours were not particularly tiring. But after a few hours of plane and car ride, Jiang Hai and the others still felt as if they were going to collapse from exhaustion after arriving at Magan. After arriving at Magan, they checked into a very famous local hotel. Jiang Hai himself was not short of money. Needless to say, he directly rented a floor of the hotel. Everyone had a separate room. After putting down their things, they also prepared to have a good rest. The wine festival would start tomorrow. They had to be well rested today. And Connor Murphy also explained the situation of the competition to Jiang Hai. The wine tasting competition in Magan was completely different from the beef exhibition and fishing exhibition that Jiang Hai had participated in the past. The selection here was a blind selection. There was no so-called exhibition hall, display space, or anything like that that could be used by others to attract people's attention. There were only tables here. Everyone who came to participate could be assigned a place. The participating wines were placed on the tables, but the outside of the wines would be covered with a thick craft paper, making it impossible to see the shape and style of the wine bottle. Of course, the wine cups and the like were also not visible. Then these participants could taste these wines and then give blind scores to these numbered wines. This was the fairest competition. This was also the reason why Dulles Gerard was so confident. After all, Jiang Hai's soaring dragon manor was not famous, and there was no money to be used for public relations and publicity. It was not that Jiang Hai was reluctant, but that Dulles Gerard thought that there was no need to make money yet. And such a blind selection, for him, meant that their wines would not win a prize. That would be strange. Although Jiang Hai didn't know much about wine, seeing how confident Dulles Gerard and Connor Murphy were, he also felt full of confidence. Chapter 728. Hugging the naked Chiya in his arms, Jiang Hai let the sun shine on his face, unwilling to open his eyes. Although Jiang Hai generally treated all his women the same, he still had his own preferences deep in his heart. For example, when he slept, he liked to sleep on his side, probably because he didn't have a sense of security. In the past, he used to sleep with a quilt, but now he slept with a girl in his arms. Among all the girls, there were two that Jiang Hai liked to hug the most. One was Chiya, and the other was Ai Xiaoxi. Chiya was like a snow fairy since she was young, and she couldn't be exposed to the sun, which made her body lack calcium. Although she recovered under the nourishment of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, her body was especially soft, probably because she lacked calcium since she was young. Hugging her in his arms was like a big ball of cotton, but she was still chubby and had her own body fragrance. It was very comfortable to hug and smell, so Jiang Hai especially liked to hug her to sleep. Even when they were doing that kind of thing, Jiang Hai rarely left her body. He couldn't wait to rub her into his arms. Chiya also liked Jiang Hai like this. She also liked to stick to Jiang Hai's side, which made her feel very comfortable. Besides Chiya, the second person that Jiang Hai liked to hug to sleep was Ai Xiaoxi. Ai Xiaoxi was born with a cold body, so when she was young, she had a fever, which was very serious. After absorbing Jiang Hai's spiritual energy and being cured, her body still maintained a cold feeling all year round. Jiang Hai felt very comfortable when hugging her, especially during summer, and when sleeping, it was really comfortable. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai liked to hug them the most. They were also very infatuated with Jiang Hai's embrace, which made them feel extremely safe and convenient. As for what it was convenient to do, there was no need to say much. If he said too much, the editor would find trouble with Jiang Hai again. Knock, knock, knock. Just when Jiang Hai was sleeping soundly, there was a sudden knock on the door. Jiang Hai didn't wake up, but Hilda, who was sleeping in the outermost room, woke up. They identified themselves as Jiang Hai's maids. In addition to the necessary impulses in Jiang Hai, they also needed to do some errands. Hearing the knock on the door, she also stretched, then got out of bed, wrapped a towel around her body, and went to the outermost door of the suite. Looking through the peephole, she saw Aphrodite and Feng Yunshan outside. Seeing that it was them, she opened the door. Jiang Hai hasn't gotten up yet? Looking at the naked Hilda, Feng Yunshan was stunned for a moment after the door opened, then said a little gloomily. Hearing her words, Hilda also pointed inside, then shrugged. Seeing her actions, Feng Yunshan and Aphrodite also walked in, then Feng Yunshan walked into Jiang Hai's room. Looking at the four people lying on Jiang Hai's big bed, she couldn't help but be a little speechless. Perhaps feeling that the atmosphere in the room was not right, Qi Jia, who was sleeping behind Jiang Hai, and Paige, who was sleeping next to Chia, also woke up. When they saw Feng Yunshan, they couldn't help but look at her with some confusion. What's going on? Hey, wake up, Uncle Dulles over there is already done, we're about to set off. Seeing that Jiang Hai and Chia were still sleeping comfortably, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but pat Jiang Hai's leg and said to him. In fact, Jiang Hai was also in a state of light sleep at this time. Jiang Hai heard everything she said, including her coming in. Jiang Hai also knew, but he didn't want to get up. But now, hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh helplessly. After all, he still had business to do today. After letting go of Chia's body, Jiang Hai also sat up helplessly. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Chia also woke up from her sleep. Seeing that everyone was awake, Feng Yunshan told them that Dulles Gerard had already finished downstairs and asked them to hurry up. Only then did these people get out of bed again. After washing their faces and brushing their teeth, they hurriedly went downstairs without even eating breakfast. After all, business was the most important thing. After arriving downstairs, Dulles Gerard, Connor Murphy, and other people had been waiting for a long time. Seeing that Jiang Hai and the others finally came down, everyone also got on the bus and went to the venue of the Magan Wine Festival. When they were on the bus, Jiang Hai and the others found that compared to yesterday, there were a lot more cars on the streets of Magan today. Magan was a place with rich tourism resources. Leisure squares, historical relics, cultural heritage, food, mellow wine, green vineyards. It could be said that Magan in France was indeed a place that attracted tourists with its rural scenery and history. Especially in April every year, it attracted countless wine lovers who came here from afar to taste the wine. Like the Paris agricultural competition, the Magan competition was also one of the famous wine competitions in France. It had a long history and was well known. The Magan competition began in 1925, but it was not an independent competition at that time. It first appeared in the exhibition called Comite des Foires, French, which was a regional agricultural and cultural exposition. The wine competition was only one of the units, but later, wine occupied a large part of the exposition. So in 1948, the name of the exposition was changed to the Magan Exposition and French Wine Exposition. The competition was unfair and only promoted the wine of the region. It was also a free promotion for the wine of the whole French country. In February 2006, after consideration, the competition was separated from the exposition and became an independent competition. Under the new starting point, the local characteristics of the competition were more obvious, and because of the voting characteristics of the competition, it was a blind vote. This made the wine competition here one of the reasons why many foreign wines were willing to come here to participate in the competition. This was because people were biased. Other than those who worshipped foreign countries, most people were biased towards their own country. If there is almost no difference between two bottles of wine, or the difference is not big, then they will give the wine of their own country a high score. And the wine of foreign countries must have a low score. This is inevitable, especially because Europeans are very arrogant and proud of their own country. So when the Magan competition was established, it was set to be a blind vote. This also made many foreign producers see an opportunity. In terms of red wine, the best red wine in the world is French. The other wines, such as those from Italy and Australia, were all free. If they could make a name for themselves in France, it would be a great promotion for a red wine brand. Every year, many people would come to France to show their red wine. The Magan competition is also very powerful. Basically, among the people who come, 20 to 30% will win prizes. But the gold, silver, and bronze prizes are not certain. Except for the gold prize, the others are basically consolation prizes. With Dulles Gerard's confidence, he came here to get the gold prize. He has no interest in the silver and bronze prizes. After the bus arrived at the destination, Jianghu and the others helped to unload the wine in the bus. Then the organizer here came to take the wine and cold it. Then he looked for a machine to specially wrap each bottle of wine. He was determined to make these wines look the same. Waiting for the most suitable time, the wine will be taken out for the tourists to taste. After Jianghu and the others took the wine, Feng Yunshan and the others also couldn't sit still. They came here to accompany Jianghu to participate in the competition, and also to have fun. They didn't want to be staff here, so after thinking for a while, Jianghu asked Azalina and Knerson Peters to accompany them to have fun. It's good to walk around here. Moreover, they can also participate in the voting. Although among hundreds or thousands of people, the votes of these 10 girls may not be of much use, but at least they can guarantee a bottom line, right? Jianghu doesn't drink red wine. He can't taste his wine in the end. As for his boss, he stayed with Dulles Gerard and Connor Murphy at the organizer's place. After sitting for a while, the competition began. Groups of people were let in and walked in front of the wine tables to taste the wine. At first, Jianghu was a little interested, but later he lost interest. So after looking around, he decided to go out and get some food. He was indeed a little hungry. One must know that he didn't eat anything delicious on the plane yesterday. After getting off the plane, he sat for several hours in the car. After returning to the hotel, he was really tired, but he wasn't too hungry. After eating a simple meal, Jianghu and the others went to sleep. Although they didn't do anything, they were really tired and sleepy. In the morning, they didn't eat anything and came here directly. Now that they weren't busy, Jianghu felt that his stomach was a little hesitant. After looking around, Jianghu decided to go eat something. After talking to Dulles Gerard, he went outside the competition. There were a lot of things to eat there. One must know, what kind of competition was this? Wine competition, except for the fighting nation, few people would drink on an empty stomach early in the morning. In addition, where there are people, there will be business. The competition itself doesn't have a buffet restaurant. Therefore, many hawkers and local residents have found such a business opportunity. They set up a lot of food stalls outside the competition venue. Jianghu's goal was to get here. After coming outside, Jianghu glanced around and couldn't help but feel that his saliva secretion increased again. In terms of Western cuisine, French cuisine and Italian cuisine were two top-notch branches of Western cuisine. German cuisine was meat, Russian cuisine was fish, and English cuisine was, potatoes, but French and Italian cuisine were indeed not bad. At this time, the stalls outside were basically French snacks, but there were also some Italian snacks. Most of them were crepes. This kind of snack was a traditional French snack. It basically had two flavors, salty and sweet. If you went to a traditional crepe stall, the main meal would be salty crepes, the dessert would be sweet crepes, and the drink would be apple wine, which was popular in France. This thing was just like a sandwich. The outer layer was made of flour, water, eggs, butter, and so on. The inside was a mess of all kinds of things. There were eggs, ham, cheese, mushrooms, sautéed crabs, salmon, beef, and so on. You could eat whatever you wanted, but the quantity and type were different, so naturally, the price was different. In addition to crepes, there were also macarons outside. This was a kind of dessert. Anyway, Jianghu didn't like to eat it. There was also panini, which was an Italian fast food. It was estimated that people who like to eat kaifeng in China should be familiar with it. But in fact, panini wasn't a hamburger, but a sandwich. The fillings in the middle could also be chosen. The cooking method was very simple. The things mentioned above were all cheap, €1 or 2. The expensive ones with a lot of extra things could be bought for €3. There was also a more expensive kind of pancake, which was bread and pancakes. The general price was €2 to €5, but if the ingredients were good, it was normal to sell for €10. €10 was equivalent to more than 70 yuan, which was really not cheap. In addition, there were also snails and foie gras rolls outside. He had to admit that the French really liked to eat these two things. But Jianghu wasn't too interested in these things, especially snails. He didn't like to eat them. He didn't feel that these things were delicious. If he wanted to eat this kind of food, he could eat bamboo clams and the like. It was delicious and convenient. After walking around outside, Jianghu bought 2 crepes and a panini before going back. He found an empty corner in the venue and began to eat. But he didn't notice that 3 figures were coming in from outside. These 3 figures were a man and 2 women. The 2 women were together, talking and laughing all the way, and the man was also very gentlemanly. But what was a little surprising was that these 3 people were all wearing thick sunglasses at this time. There were also a few people in the crowd who unconsciously moved around these 3 people, faintly protecting them in the middle of these people. However, the 3 people who came in were still talking and laughing, but suddenly, one of the women glanced around and saw Jianghu sitting in the corner. Then she deliberately took off her sunglasses and glanced at him. She couldn't help but be surprised. Why is that guy here? Looking at Jianghu, who was sitting there and eating like a madman, the woman muttered to herself with some doubts. Chapter 729. Who? Hearing the woman's words, her female companion and the man also looked at her and asked with some doubts. Oh, it's nothing, one of our friends. After the woman heard the man's words, she chuckled, then gently pointed to the other female companion. After the woman took a look, she also found Jianghu sitting in the distance. Why is he here? Sure enough, after the woman saw it, her reaction was exactly the same as the other woman's. I don't know, but I can go over and ask. Thinking of this, the woman took the other woman to Jianghu's side. As for the man, after learning that this person knows them, he thought for a while and followed them. Oh, why is our Mr. Moneybags so pitiful? Eating crepes here? Looking at Jianghu sitting there, as soon as she came over, the woman said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jianghu couldn't help but look up at her in confusion. There was some confusion in his eyes, then after looking around, he looked at her with some uncertainty. You called me? Looking at this person, Jianghu pointed to himself with some uncertainty. Don't pretend to know me, don't tell me you don't know who I am. Looking at Jianghu acting so well, the woman on the opposite side couldn't help but be a little angry. This guy didn't really forget about me, did he? Doesn't he pay attention to the entertainment industry? I'm so popular. Ahem, hee. Hearing her words, Jianghu coughed awkwardly. In fact, with Jianghu's memory, it's impossible for him to forget them. Because the 2 women in front of him are very hostile to him. They are Selena Gomez's good friends. When Selena Gomez took him to see the Victoria's Secret show, Jianghu knew about the relationship between them. However, in Jianghu's opinion, they might not have many opportunities to meet in this life. But he did not expect that enemies would meet on a narrow road. They actually met in France. Yes, Jianghu knows the two women in front of him. One is the popular actress, Taylor Swift, but Jianghu's relationship with her is not very good. The other is also Selena Gomez's good friend, Eli Golding. Why are you here, a big star? Aren't you supposed to be very busy? Looking at the woman in front of him, since he can't avoid it, Jianghu will just say it directly. If he is exposed, it will be even more embarrassing. Jianghu is most afraid of embarrassment. You're really not up to date with the news. Don't you know that I've come to the UK to try my luck? And Eli is originally British. Looking at Jianghu, Taylor Swift said with a proud face, but Jianghu found it hard to understand. What is there to be proud of? I'm really sorry this time. I don't read entertainment reports or anything. I don't like listening to music very much. If you act in a movie in the future, maybe I will pay attention to it. After thinking about it, Jianghu looked at Taylor Swift and said. Hearing Jianghu's words, Taylor Swift really wanted to bite him to death, but she knew that with Jianghu's fearless character, it would be difficult to have any effect on him. Taylor, wait a minute, is this your friend? At this time, the man who had been standing behind Taylor Swift hesitated for a moment before deciding to stand up and tentatively ask Taylor Swift. Well, I guess so. Listening to the man behind her, Taylor Swift hesitated and said to him. Hello, my name is Tom Hiddleston, I'm also British. Hearing Taylor Swift's confirmation, although the man still had some doubts, he smiled and reached out his hand and said to Jianghu. Hearing his words, Jianghu also stood up and shook hands with him. Then he found that he looked a little familiar. After thinking for a while, a name popped up in Jianghu's mind. Oh, hello, my name is Jianghu, you are Loki? Looking at the man in front of him, Jianghu asked with some uncertainty. Yes, I played Loki in Marvel. I didn't expect Mr. Jianghu to know me. Hearing that Jianghu knew him, Tom Hiddleston couldn't help but smile bitterly and said with a smile. Yes, the man named Tom Hiddleston was the villain of Thor 1, 2, and Avengers in the Marvel Universe. He was also the actor of the Nordic god of mischief, Loki. Regarding this person, Jianghu still knows him, but in fact, as long as he is an actor, he doesn't want to be labeled as a character. Speaking of which, this person has also acted in a lot of movies, but Jianghu really hasn't seen them. Yeah, I like your role very much, Tom Hiddleston. Hiddleston what? Hearing his words, Jianghu also stood up, stopped eating the crepe, and said to him with a smile. Hearing Jianghu's words, Tom Hiddleston on the opposite side couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Hiddleston. Okay, Mr. Hitler. Yes, Hiddleston. Mr. Hiddleston. It's Dee Dee. Seeing that Jianghu kept calling him Hitler, Tom Hiddleston couldn't help but be a little speechless, but he could see that Jianghu wasn't acting. Moreover, it was really easy to call his name wrongly, especially Jianghu's accent wasn't quite right. Well, don't worry about what he's called. You haven't answered my question yet. Why are you here? Looking at Jianghu and Tom Hiddleston in front of her, Taylor Swift couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. How long would this conversation last? She directly cut the Gordian knot. She didn't care what Tom Hiddleston, who was pursuing her, was thinking. Anyway, she directly said it. The wine produced in my manor is here to participate in the competition. It just so happens that I haven't been to Europe, so I came over to have some fun. Hearing her words, Jianghu shrugged. This was not a shameful thing, so he said directly. Oh, you also produce wine? Aren't you selling cattle and fish? Hearing Jianghu's words, Taylor Swift couldn't help but ask. Yeah, I also grow grapes. Nodding, Jianghu said with certainty. What about your wine? We are friends, right? Treat us to a drink. Looking at Jianghu, Taylor Swift said with a serious face. Looking at her, Jianghu couldn't help but scratch his head. he only brought 120 bottles in total. He still had to attend the grape sprinkling conference in Brussels. He couldn't help but look at Dulles Gerard in the distance and waved at him. Seeing the boss calling him, Dulles Gerard also walked over quickly and came to Jianghai's side. As for Taylor Swift, this old man didn't know her. He didn't watch movies or listen to pop music. "Boss, what's the matter?" Although Jianghai has a good relationship with his employees, outside, the old-fashioned Dulles Gerard still calls Jianghai boss or something like that. In his view, this is a rule that can't be abolished. Jianghai saw that he was so stubborn and didn't refuse him. To be honest, it feels good to have someone call him boss. "Is there any extra wine? My three, friends want to try it." Hearing Jianghai's words, Dulles Gerard glanced at the two women and one man in front of him, then smiled and said please wait a moment, and then left. "You really look like that." Looking at Dulles Gerard's posture, Taylor Swift couldn't help but think of the nobles in Europe in the past. It seems that those nobles have a butler like this. Unexpectedly, Jianghai really has something. After listening to her words, Jianghai didn't pay attention to her, but continued to pick up the crepe and eat. The cider also tasted good. Not long after, Dulles Gerard came over with a tray. There were 3 goblets on it, plus a decanter. At this time, there was a lot of red wine in the decanter, which should have been sobered up. Looking at it from a distance, Eli Golding and Tom Hiddleston's eyes couldn't help but light up. Tom Hiddleston's family conditions weren't ordinary since he was a child. In elementary school, he went to Nudanglong Primary School, and in middle school, he went to Eton College. It should be known that Eton College wasn't a school that could be entered with money. It was the most famous aristocratic school in the United Kingdom. The tuition fee for that year, according to the current era, was less than $1,800,000. In college, he went to Pembroke College at the University of Cambridge to study classical literature. To be honest, if it wasn't for his family's wealth, who would have studied this kind of thing? Therefore, it could be said that he had been exposed to things like top red wine since he was a child. When he saw the red wine hanging on the glass from afar, he was secretly shocked. The quality of the red wine seemed to be quite good. Although Eli Golding's family conditions weren't very good when she was a child, when she grew up, she was very popular. Of course, this popularity was limited to the United Kingdom, and she had some ambiguous relationship with a British prince. As for how far they had gone, no one knew. However, when they attended some activities together, it was quite ambiguous. With this relationship, she naturally tasted a lot of good wine in recent years, and she knew that this wine was good at a glance. On the other hand, Taylor Swift, to be honest, wasn't a person who knew much about these things. She had lived on a Christmas tree farm since she was a child, so she didn't have much contact with these things. Later, when she became famous and grew up, she used to be a cultured person. However, her main music was still mainly country music. The so-called country music was really not related to these things. As far as Jianghai knew, the most famous country music should be that song. "My hometown is in this ton air. I was born and raised in this ton air." Huh? Isn't this country music? Well, Jianghai really didn't know about music. "This wine looks good." Looking at Dulles Gerard, who came over with a tray, Tom Hiddleston couldn't help but take the initiative to take the tray. This was to show his gentlemanly side in front of others. Then, he poured himself a glass of wine. While smelling it, he gently shook the wine glass. It really looked like something. The 13 bars instantly reached the maximum value. Unfortunately, Jianghai really didn't understand these things. Otherwise, with his bad character, he might have exposed something. It's really good. The taste of this wine is mellow, but it's not too stimulating. At this time, Eli Golding also said softly, Is this wine very good?" Taylor Swift, who was on the other side, glanced at it and asked uncertainly. "It looks good. Try it." Looking at Taylor Swift, Tom Hiddleston couldn't help but smile. Then, he took a sip. Then, his eyes unconsciously widened, and his face was full of admiration. As for Eli Golding, after taking a sip, he also fell into a state of intoxication. On the other side, although Taylor Swift didn't understand these things, after taking a sip, she couldn't help but nod gently. She could still distinguish whether it was good or not. Looking at the wine in front of him, Tom Hiddleston couldn't help but praise, "The taste of this wine is really strange." That feeling is really difficult to describe in words. The feeling of the wine reverberating back and forth in the mouth is really intoxicating. Hearing his words, Eli Golding couldn't help but feel a little moved. He kept nodding at the side, indicating that he agreed with his words. "Is it as good as you say?" Hearing Tom Hiddleston's words, Taylor Swift couldn't help but glance at Jianghu. Although she felt that this wine was really good, it didn't seem to be to the point of praising it so much. "Does this wine have a name?" But this time, Tom Hiddleston didn't answer her. Instead, after taking another sip, he looked at Dulles Gerard and asked. He could see that the old man in front of him was definitely someone who knew a lot about wine. "This wine is called First Love. It's a kind of grape wine produced in our manor. In addition to First Love, our wine also has Passionate Love and Parting. But now, we only brought First Love." Listening to Tom Hiddleston's words, Dulles Gerard couldn't help but laugh as he said the name of the wine that he and Jianghu had researched. First Love was indeed named by him, but Passionate Love and Parting were named by Jianghu. The two wines were actually brewed using the same method, but the sugar content and fermentation time were different. First Love had a lower sugar content, and at the same time, it was slightly more sour and astringent. After drinking it, one would feel a sense of immaturity, but there was also a faint sweetness in between, which made one's mood fluctuate. As for Passionate Love, it had the highest sugar content, and the lowest astringent taste. After drinking it, one would feel a sense of sweetness all over their body, as if they were in the midst of passionate love. It was irresistible. The final parting. Anyway, Jianghu didn't like to drink it. He preferred to drink something sweeter. Red wine and coffee were not his cup of tea. Chapter 730. This guy is really something. Taylor Swift couldn't help but mutter in a low voice after listening to Tom Hiddleston's words. She originally came here just to ridicule Jianghu, but now it seemed that Jianghu had unconsciously pretended to be arrogant. This kind of unintentional behavior was often the most fatal. Just because of a glass of wine, it seemed that Ellie Golding, who was originally on the same side with her, had changed his mind at this time. Originally, she didn't like Jianghu because Jianghu was a rich playboy. And in her opinion, Jianghu should be a very low existence. No matter how rich a cattle farmer was, he wouldn't have any self-restraint. But now she found that Jianghu's manor could produce such red wine, which really made her change her opinion of Jianghu. "Well, then I wish your red wine a good result. Let's go." Taylor Swift curled her lips and said loudly while looking at Jianghu sitting here. After patting Jianghu's shoulder, she left with the other two. Jianghu didn't care about their departure because he didn't care about these things. Besides, who was friends with them? After watching the three leave, Jianghu continued to sit here and eat the crepe. A day passed in the blink of an eye, and the first day of the competition was over. The organizers also took back the voting papers that were sent out today and sealed them. Today's votes would be displayed together with tomorrow's votes and the day after tomorrow, and then the votes would be publicly announced. The winner of the competition would be decided on the third day. Jianghu had nothing to say about this. After the end of the first day, he returned to the hotel with the girls. Today, these girls had a lot of fun nearby. Of course, there were always some flies flying around nearby. He had to admit that the French, especially the French men, really deserved a beating. If it weren't for Knerson Peters, it wouldn't be easy for them to get rid of these people. After coming back and complaining to Jianghu and the others went to rest. Early the next morning, Jianghu and the others went to the banquet again, but because they had already strolled around yesterday, they had no interest in this place. So after helping to make the wine, Jianghu, and the others took the bus directly to the nearby area to play. After all, this place had a history of 1,400 to 500 years. There were some buildings and the like, which they could still take a look at and take photos of. Although Magaon wasn't big, there was no problem for them to walk around for a day. So Jianghu and the others played here for a day. But on the third day, they couldn't play anymore. They went to the venue and waited for the final award ceremony. There were a total of 29 wineries participating in this year's Magaon wine competition. Most of them were French wineries. Other than that, there were a few Australian wineries. Some of them were from the Clare Valley and some were from Gunnawara. These two places were the best wine producers in Australia. They were all here for the medals. In addition, Jianghu wasn't very clear about the other wineries, but he was still very confident about the final ranking of his wine. He didn't see Dulles Gerard and the others' calm expressions. Even wineries like them weren't worried, so why should he be worried? In fact, Jianghu was thinking too much. Dulles Gerard was also very worried at this time, but he was used to this, so he looked very confident. At 10:00 in the morning, the results of the selection were out. The first thing that was announced was the ranking of the wines sent by these wineries. The quality of a glass of red wine couldn't be judged just by tasting it. First of all, color and smell were equally important. After that, it was tasting. After tasting it, there would be an aftertaste. So the rankings were divided into these 4 categories. First, the rankings of these 4 categories were posted. Then, there would be a comprehensive evaluation and a gold award. The first thing that was posted was the color ranking. The highest score was 10 points, and the lowest score was 6 points. The tables in the hands of the people who came to taste the red wine were quite complicated. Each bottle of wine was listed separately, so each bottle of wine would be rated by hundreds and thousands of people. Then, the average was taken. One had to admit that this was a lot of work. After the ranking was posted, Jianghu and the others also went to take a look. With a glance, Jianghu and the others couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. To be honest, the mellower the wine, the better the color. After all, Jianghu's red wine had only been stored for half a year. Although they were very confident in the taste, they weren't very confident in the color and smell. But fortunately, these people who tasted the wine felt that it was good. Jianghu's Soaring Dragon Manor's First Love had a fragrance score of 9.71. It was ranked 4th among the 29 red wines. The result was quite good. The first place was the world's #1 winery, Chateau Lafite. This red wine had been stored in the cellar for 5 years. At least in terms of color and smell, it wasn't comparable to Jianghu's wine. The second place was Mouton Winery's red wine this year. If it was Mouton Winery, people might not be very familiar with it. If it was the full name of this winery, it was estimated that many people would know it. Mouton Rothschild Winery. Yes, they were the winery of the world's #1 conglomerate, the Rothschild family. Before World War II, the Rothschild family was the world's #1 conglomerate. But later, they failed to invade the United States. 2 branches were divided, becoming the Rockefeller family and the Morgan family. They were still the #1 family in Europe. No one dared to challenge them, even if it was just a small winery. Looking at such a ranking, Dulles Gerard and Jianghu were relieved. But the other people here were surprised, especially those on Romani Conti's side. The way they looked at Jianghu's group was a bit strange. Some were afraid, some were doubtful, and some were surprised. Obviously, they didn't put Jianghu's Soaring Dragon Manor in their eyes. In their view, Jianghu's Soaring Dragon Manor's wine could be ranked in the top 20. After all, none of the wineries here had a strong background. They couldn't help but be surprised. But what happened next made them even more surprised. After the second ranking came out, these people couldn't help but secretly smack their lips. This time, Jianghu's wine was still at the top. But it wasn't the 4th place, but the 3rd place. The first place was Romani Conti, the second place was Lafite, and the third place was Jianghai's Soaring Dragon Manor. This made these people a little uproar. They looked at Jianghai's eyes with some hostility. It was true that only a fierce dragon could cross the river. As soon as Jianghai came over, he gave these people a show of strength. With the smell and color, Jianghai's wine couldn't escape a bronze medal. If the taste and aftertaste were good, there was even a chance to win a silver medal. This Magaon wine competition had a total of 1 gold medal, 4 silver medals, and 6 bronze medals. With Jianghai's current ranking, it was inevitable that he would win an award. It seems that a strong enemy has risen in the United States. Soaring Dragon Manor, I have never heard of it before. Looking at Jianghai's group, the people of other wineries here whispered. Unconsciously, there was a gap between them and Jianghai's group. However, Jianghai didn't care about this. What a joke, he was here to make a name for himself. He didn't have to worry about sales. Whether it was Walton or Boston's Western restaurants, as long as he got a gold medal here, when he went back, although it was unlikely that he would be able to sell a box of 6 bottles for $20,000 like the top wineries in Bordeaux, it was still not a problem. But $1,000 a bottle is not a problem. Jianghai has a total of hundreds of thousands of bottles of wine hidden in the cellar. It seems that this is a very considerable income. The most important thing is that this is only the first year. If it is stored for 3 years, it may not be impossible to sell it for $2,000 or $3,000 a bottle. And he has been storing wine all these years. It seems that Red Winery, which Jianghai thought was just for fun, also has a lot of income. Thinking of this, Jianghai's eyes couldn't help but light up. He wanted to see the rankings of the last 2 lists that they were most confident in. At this time, the staff took out the third list, which was about taste. Everyone's eyes were also fixed on him. This list was the most important one among the 4 lists. If the first 4 lists accounted for 5% of the score, and the smell accounted for 10% of the score, then the taste accounted for 70% of the score, and the aftertaste accounted for the remaining 15%. In the first 2 lists, Jianghai's ranking was good. Now, let's take a look at the list that they were most confident in. When the list was posted, everyone present couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The way they looked at Jianghai also changed, including the Lafite Chateau and the Romanée-Conti Chateau, who had been very calm all this time. Jianghai's face showed a trace of a smile, because they saw a familiar name in the first place of the list. Soaring Dragon Manor's First Love, 998. Looking at this score, they couldn't help but clench their fists. On the other side, Aphrodite and the others were already celebrating. Dulles Gerard was so excited that his hands were shaking, but his face was still very calm. Even O'Connor Murphy, who was called Dead Face by Jianghai, showed a trace of excitement on his face at this time, although it was uglier than crying. They were quite confident in their wine, but they didn't think that the taste of this wine would be able to win over those picky Frenchmen in an instant. In addition to their group, the others were whispering. They didn't think that the result would be like this. I don't know if the conference has any reasons to persuade us about this result. After these people whispered under the stage for a while, they finally pushed out the representative of Lafite and said to the people at the conference. To be honest, they weren't very convinced by this result. When we first calculated this information, we were also very surprised, but after we tasted this bottle of wine called First Love from Mr. Jianghai's Soaring Dragon Manor, we think that they deserve this score. Hearing the representative of Lafite, an old man at the conference stood up. To be honest, at first, they didn't believe that Jianghai's wine was so good. But after tasting it, they knew that this score was absolutely not fake, because this wine was really impeccable in terms of taste. Even Dulles Gerard, an old man whose sense of taste had deteriorated, could taste the taste of First Love, not to mention these judges who had strengthened their sense of taste. After tasting this wine, they were all intoxicated. It could be said that this wine wasn't inferior to those special treasured wines. Now that someone had raised doubts, they could also fight back hard. After hearing their words, Jianghai smiled indifferently. Dulles Gerard had already prepared a glass of wine for these people. Facts spoke louder than anything else. Jianghu didn't want to argue with them here. After looking at the red wine, the remaining 28 people hesitated for a while, but they still picked up a glass and tasted it. After tasting it, they frowned. It wasn't because it tasted bad, but because it was too good, so good that they didn't know what to say. Looking at Saikin's score, they knew that their defeat this time wasn't unjust. After the third list was settled, the fourth list was quickly released. Jianghu's wine completely crushed these brands' wines in terms of taste. After all, these brands didn't take out their best wines to participate in the competition. They only participated in the competition with their main brands this year, which were basically 3 to 5 years old. If they took out those rare wines that were more than 10 years old, Jianghu's first love, after all, was congenitally deficient and might not be their opponent. However, these commercial wines were indeed worse than Jianghu's wine. There was nothing to say about this. On the fourth list, Jianghu was still at the top. There was nothing much to say about the rest of the awards. It was unlikely that the gold medal didn't belong to Jianghu. In this way, Jianghu's first trip to Europe was a victory. After winning a gold medal, Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy took the remaining wine to Brussels, the capital of Belgium, where they would participate in another cocktail party. Jianghu and the others returned to Paris, France. Although they didn't have a good impression of this country and its people, since they were already here, Jianghu and the others would still visit. Chapter 731. Jianghu's first stop in Europe was France. After all, since they were already here, Jianghu naturally couldn't leave without taking a look. There were many interesting places in Paris. The three most famous landmarks in Paris were the 12th century Catholic Church and Notre Dame de Paris. This place was quite famous, not only because of its landmarks, but also because of its fame. It was because of a novel by Victor Hugo, The Strange Man in the Bell Tower. Later, this novel was also made into a movie, a TV series, and so on. It was very popular. In addition, there was the Arc de Triomphe built by Napoleon, who once conquered Europe. Although he lost to the weather of Soviet Russia in the end, the last landmark was the Eiffel Tower. Needless to say, it was naturally known all over the world. Of course, in addition to these 3 points, there were many interesting places in Paris, such as the Louvre, the Tuileries Garden, the Place de la Concorde, the Champs-Élysées, the Place de Gaulle, where the Arc de Triomphe was located, and so on. These places were all famous places to visit. Since Jianghu and the others were here, they naturally had to take a good look. However, after taking a look, Jianghu felt that this place was nothing special. Jianghu was not a saint, so he naturally had no interest in Notre Dame de Paris. The Eiffel Tower and the others also went to take a look. However, it was just an iron tower, and there was nothing to see. It was just a view of the Seine. However, Jianghu was afraid of heights, so this place was not a good place. The only place that Jianghu thought was good was the Louvre, but unfortunately, other than him, the others were not too interested. They simply looked at it for a day and left. They hadn't even seen 1/3 of it. On the contrary, the Champs-Élysées was the favorite place of these girls. But to be honest, the Champs-Élysées was actually quite shabby, at least in Jianghu's eyes. The buildings were shabby, and the streets were shabby, however, there were many shops and so on. This was the place with the highest concentration of luxury goods in the world besides the Fifth Avenue. Almost all of the world's top brands, clothing stores, and perfume stores were gathered here. Even the French National Day Parade on July 14th was held on this road, but Jianghu didn't have the time to wait until July to go back. So after a simple 3 to 4 days, they went to their second country in Europe, Italy. In Rome, Italy, they walked around the Vatican. The name of Rome was probably very familiar to everyone. Ancient Rome was once the most powerful empire in the world. Although the supporters of the ancient Wuxia would not agree with this, purely in terms of territory, the territory of Rome was indeed much larger than the dynasties of the Wuxia. Of course, there was no way to compare it with the Yuan dynasty. The city of Rome had a history of 2,500 years. It was one of the most famous historical and cultural cities in the world. One must know that the reputation of Rome's Julius Caesar in Europe and the United States was even as famous as the Huaxia's Emperor Qin Shi Huang and Emperor Taizong of Tang. Jianghu and the others also had a good time here. At the same time, they also tasted the most famous legendary pizza in Naples. After all, pizza was invented here. Of course, if they looked further, they might find Marco Polo. When he first learned how to make noodles, he didn't learn how to make pasta. When he learned how to make pies, he didn't learn how to make pizza. However, at this time in China, even the cheapest pizza was more valuable than pies. For example, Jianghu liked to eat pizza. However, the taste of Italian pizza was very ordinary for Jianghu. He didn't like to eat such thin pies. In addition to Rome, they also went to visit the Vatican in Italy. Some religious issues were involved here, so Jianghu didn't say much. He just took a simple look and then left like a group of ordinary tourists. After visiting the Vatican, Jianghu and the others drove directly to the music capital, Vienna. However, there was no reason to stay here because Jianghu really didn't understand the operas. The most famous opera here was basically booked by some Huaxia bands. Because almost all of the performances here were performed by Huaxia bands. If you went to take a look, you would find that almost 3 or 4 out of 10 performances were performed by Huaxia bands. If it wasn't a band, it was a singer, and there were even performances of Peking opera. Jianghu didn't have anything to say about this. The most important thing was that this wasn't an invitation, but it was booked by himself. Well, the people of Huaxia were indeed very rich now. Let these European country bumpkins who had never seen a tycoon take a good look at what a real rich person was. After leaving Vienna, Jianghu and the others went to Vienna's neighboring country, Switzerland. When talking about Switzerland, people often confused it with Sweden, but in fact, these two countries were quite easy to distinguish in Europe. Sweden was a Nordic country. Whether it was territory or military strength, it was actually not bad. But Switzerland, other than being rich, really did not have any hard power. This country had always been in a neutral state, and it had no choice but to be neutral. Look at its location. To the north was Germany, to the south was Italy, to the west was France, and to the east was Austria. It was safe to say that these 4 countries were not easy to get along with in Switzerland. In World War I, the Axis countries were Germany and Austria. In World War II, it was Germany and Italy. And France was once the overlord of Europe. It was no joke. However, the Swiss were indeed very stubborn. They were willing to go all out. Whenever there was a war, they would remain neutral. They could do whatever they wanted. They did not have any political leanings at all. They were not afraid of condemnation. Anyway, they had no land and no manpower. They could do whatever they wanted. Just by relying on the strength of a barefooted person who was not afraid of wearing shoes and the courage that everyone was convinced of, life in this country was very stable here. Everyone knew about Switzerland, not only because of the cowardice of this guy, but also because this country produced a lot of watches. When Jianghu and the others came here, they naturally bought a lot of watches. Jianghu brought 2 or 3 watches, and all the girls gave 1 watch. This made the girls very happy. After buying the watches in a group, they once again headed north to Belgium. Maybe it was because this country was really dependent on watches, so the people in this country were very rich. The young people in the European Union, no, the young people in the United States, actually didn't have a high income. Of course, if you convert the money into RMB, it would be very high. It would be around 14 to 5,000 RMB. But these people couldn't make money in Europe and then go back to China to spend it. They also made money in Europe and spent it in Europe. Therefore, the purchase rate of 2,000 yuan was not particularly high in China. It was equivalent to 3,000 or 4,000 yuan in the US. In Europe, generally speaking, young people in their early 20s, who just graduated from university, had an income of around 2,000 RMB a month. But they didn't need to pay for medical treatment, the place they lived was cheap, and the food they ate was cheap. Vegetables and fruits were expensive, but meat was cheap. 2,000 RMB was enough for them to spend. But in Switzerland, the people were obviously very rich. Basically, everyone had an income of 4 to 5,000 RMB a month. In Europe, Switzerland was definitely worthy of being called a giant. After playing in Switzerland, Jianghu originally wanted to experience the Netherlands, especially Amsterdam in the Netherlands. When he was in China, he had heard that it was a man's paradise. Unfortunately, there was not enough time for him to go there. So, after leaving Switzerland, they went to Brussels, the capital of Belgium. The Brussels wine competition was divided into two parts. One was the Brussels wine competition, and the other was the Brussels International Wine Competition. The former was only held in Brussels, and the latter was held all over Europe. It was said that this year, they went to Bulgaria. But now, Bulgaria was basically the world of Wuxia wineries. The Wuxia people didn't have anything else, but they were rich and willing to spend money. Therefore, in these European competitions, apart from some of the guaranteed minimum, there was really no fairness to speak of. After arriving here, Jianghu naturally completed his public relations. Plus, his wine was really good, so he didn't give the other party any excuses. After winning a big prize, Jianghu's trip in Europe officially ended. Unknowingly, the time went from the end of April to the middle of May. These days, although Jianghu was in Europe, he didn't idle around in the United States. Under the leadership of Eduard Anderson and Robbins Garcia, his manner was developing very well. In particular, the fishermen had completely adapted to it, and the new boat had been driven over. Now, the two boats were taking turns, and they were very busy every night. The black fisherman, Tai Nyo, who originally sold Jianghu the aquatic plants and fish seedlings, took the initiative to ask Jianghu if he needed new fish seedlings after knowing that Jianghu had bought more sea areas. But Jianghu thought for a while, and it was not convenient to say now that he was abroad. But when he went back at the end of May or the beginning of June, he could buy some more from Tai Nyo, even though they were nourished by spiritual energy. Jianghu's fish expanded very quickly underwater, but adding some new fish seedlings was fine. At least next year, they could harvest another batch. But this time, he wasn't going to buy cheap American red fish. After knowing how strong his spiritual energy was, he didn't need to raise those small fish step by step. He was going to raise grouper and salmon directly. But the quantity he needed was not small. First, he greeted Tai Nyo, and he would naturally solve these problems. Time went by unknowingly. After receiving the grand prize of the Brussels wine competition, Jianghu and his girls also knew that Jianghu was leaving. Originally, according to Jianghu's plan, they should play in Europe for a few more days and then go back with them. But these girls didn't think so. Europe was actually similar to the United States. They had bought a lot of things here, and they weren't familiar with the place. If there was an accident, it would be troublesome. One must know that Europe wasn't very peaceful now. Not to mention the things that were not allowed to be written, the people here were not as friendly as Winthrop. After all, that was their territory. So after spending a night with Jianghu, they decided to return to Boston the next day. Jianghu didn't have anything to stop them. After returning to Boston, he was relieved and didn't have to worry about their safety here. So the next day after receiving the prize, Jianghu sent them to board the plane to Boston. Dulles Gerard and Connor Murphy went back with them. The two of them were quite happy about this trip to Europe. The gold medal of the Margaux wine competition and the gold medal of the Brussels wine competition were all honors. After returning, those wines could be sold for money. Jianghu specially called Pra Walton to see if she was interested. Of course, he also called Qi Li and Jing Jin. As for the specific situation, he let them, who were knowledgeable about business, study it. After receiving a call from Qi Jia and confirming that everyone had returned to the villa, Jianghu and Azalina were ready to leave. After everything was done in Brussels, Jianghu and Azalina boarded a flight together at the Brussels International Airport to Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. However, Jianghu didn't want to go there early. To be honest, there were very few flights from Europe to Kiev. For the specific reason, please refer to some international news. To be honest, there might not be many routes that could guarantee safety. Although they were all located in Europe, except for some developed countries in Western Europe, the rest of Europe was not as peaceful as it seemed on the surface. When they were on the plane, Azalina deliberately told Jianghu a lot of things to pay attention to. Some things were extremely sensitive in Ukraine now. If they could avoid attracting other people's attention, they would try their best not to. Regarding this point, Jianghu also had some understanding. He came here to recruit people, not to cause trouble. He was naturally very clear about this point. After a few hours of flight, the plane landed smoothly at the international airport of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Looking out from the window, although this city felt no different from some cities in China, there was still a flow of people. It was not as chaotic and war-ridden as imagined in the legends. However, as soon as he got off the plane and walked into the hall, Jianghu felt a bit nervous. Because at this time, there were a lot of soldiers on the outskirts of the Kyiv International Airport. The pace of the residents here was also very fast. They didn't want to stay here for long. This made Jianghu slightly raise his eyebrows. Chapter 732. Although there's a ceasefire here, it's not a paradise. There aren't many people who would like to stay here. Those who have the means have already left. Azalina said helplessly when she saw Jianghu's gaze. Yes, the world was like this. Those who had the ability had already escaped, and the rest were ordinary people. They had no choice. In order to eat, they had to work hard. This was the reality, even if danger would appear at any time and place by their side. Hearing her words, Jianghu sighed softly. It seemed that some things were not as simple as he thought. When he was in China, many people always said that everything in China was not good. Jianghu also yearned for a life abroad. It was not that he was a penny or anything. Everyone yearned for a better life. Some people used their own hands to change the lives around them and make the lives around them better. People called such people leaders. However, Jianghu was not a leader. He was just a salted fish. He accepted it, so he went abroad. But after he went abroad, he found that life abroad was not as good as people in China thought. The taxes here were many times higher than in China. The vegetables and fruits here were 10 times more expensive than the best vegetables and fruits in China. The pressure of life was great, but the standard of living was not too high. If compared with abroad, the advantages of abroad were that gasoline was cheap, cars were cheap, luxury goods were cheap, the air was better, the houses were cheaper, and the food and drink were more comfortable. Compared to overseas, the cost of living in China was much cheaper. Not only was the food cheap, but the clothes cheap and the necessities cheap too. The pressure of living was far less than overseas. The taxes were lower, and more money flowed into the pockets of the people. There was a minimum standard of living in China, which was not available overseas. In China, you had to pay for medical insurance, and you did not have to pay for medical treatment. People paid unemployment benefits. When they lost their jobs, the government would help them find a job and give them relief. There was also a time limit. And the most important thing was that it was very safe in China. At the very least, you didn't have to worry about going out on the streets. At any time, a strong man with an automatic rifle would rush out from the side and shoot you into a sieve. This was the advantage of being in China. Just this point alone was something that ordinary foreign countries could not compare to. For example, the current Black Orchid was indeed not a place that was different from the inside. The Soviet Union and Russia had sunk their troops to the border. While the government had always maintained the independence of Ulan, there were still some European and American supporters who were encouraging the authorities to join the European and American side. It could be said that this was the most chaotic situation. The three forces were in conflict with each other. Although it was not like some countries that were directly turned into ruins, the fear in the hearts of the people was inevitable. When the people panicked, they would do a lot of outrageous things. The crime rate would rise and people would become sensitive. This was the current situation in Wulan. "Let's go," I cherish my life very much." Jiang Hai smiled at Azalina's words, and then walked out of the airport with Azalina. As soon as they walked out of the airport, a black Lincoln limousine drove over from the street and stopped right in front of Jiang Hai. Then, from the front passenger seat up and down, a typical Slavic man appeared. He had three-dimensional 5 views, a tall nose, and deep eyes, which made him look a little unsmiling, but at the same time, he also had a sense of seriousness of blood and iron. "It's you must be Mr. Jiang Hai. I'm the receptionist here in Ukraine. My name is Kirol Barkline Froganisly Kowski. You can call me." After the man got out of the car, he came in front of Jiang Hai and extended his hand while introducing himself. But to be honest, Jiang Hai politely declined such an introduction. "Hello, Mr. Kirol " Without saying anything, Jiang Hai shook the man's hand and said calmly, "Well, welcome to Wulan." Hearing Jiang Hai directly interrupting him, the man smacked his lips with some jealousy. This is not a very polite thing to do in Ukraine, but considering that Jiang Hai is a Hua Xia in the United States, and most importantly, he has a lot of money, he still smiled and agreed. After saying a few words, he led the two into the limousine. After sitting down, Jiang Hai gently poked Azalina next to him. "Isn't your organization called KGB? What the hell is Ukraine?" Seeing Azalina looking over, Jiang Hai asked in a low voice. Later, it moved to Moscow in 1920 and was renamed KGB in 1954. At first, it was established to deal with the British MI6, the American CIB, and the Israeli Mossad. But in 1991, you know what happened. It can't be written, it will be banned. After that time, KGB split up. The largest branch was renamed the Russian Federal Security Service, and some other branches were taken over by these countries. The KGB in Ukraine is called Ukraine for short. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina did not hide anything and introduced it to him. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded his head in understanding, and then stopped talking. The car quickly drove into Kiev, but the Kiev that Jiang Hai saw didn't look like a blooming flower in spring. Although the grass was green and the trees had new branches, as the capital of a country, there was not much traffic on the streets of Kiev. Even if there were some people walking, they were basically men. It was said that the streets of Ukraine were full of beautiful women, but there was no such thing here. Everyone was in a hurry and deliberately gave way to the Lincoln limousine that was driving in this direction. It's really hard for the people to rise and hard for the people to die. Looking at the images on the street, Jiang Hai whispered. Suddenly, he remembered this sentence, but he was obviously not a good student. Except for this sentence, he could not remember anything else. But before he could sigh too much, the car soon arrived in front of a hotel. This hotel should be a local hotel and have some relationship with the government. Because Jiang Hai has never seen this hotel before, it shouldn't be a chain hotel. After the car stopped, naturally, a doorman went to park the car in the underground parking lot, and Kirol got out of the car and led Jiang Hai and Azalina to the lobby. After talking to the front desk, he gave Jiang Hai a key card. "Sir, this is your sweet key. Later, my boss will come to discuss the auction the day after tomorrow." After that, Kirol nodded to Jiang Hai, then left. Jiang Hai and Azalina also carried their luggage and walked into the elevator. There was no one to carry their luggage for them, and they couldn't find anyone to tip them. After arriving at the floor marked on the key, Jiang Hai and Azalina got off the elevator, but as soon as they came down, they saw a group of people standing outside the elevator. The leader was a Western fat man who looked about 1.7 meters tall, with an eagle-like nose, and bald hair. His eyes were scrutinizing Jiang Hai and Azalina when he saw them. But after he found that he didn't seem to know these two people, he retracted his gaze. There were also 4 big men standing beside him. He was tall and slender, wearing a black suit and sunglasses. He stood quietly beside him. After Jiang Hai and Azalina went down completely, this group of people walked up and went downstairs. "Boss, when you're here, don't leave me, even if you go to the toilet, you must let me follow you." Watching them leave, Azalina whispered to Jiang Hai and said to him. What's the situation? Listening to Azalina's serious words, Jiang Hai said with some doubts. If I'm not mistaken, that person should be the drug lord of Colombia. He must have come here to buy people, but if he can make a profit, I don't think he will mind. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also whispered. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also glanced back with some surprise. It seems that none of the people who come to buy these people are good people. It's better to be careful, so he nodded and followed Azalina into his room. The people here arranged a very good house for Jiang Hai. It was a large suite with a huge bedroom, a small bedroom, a study, a reception room, and a large hall. There was a bathroom in the hall and a bathroom in the master bedroom. The overall area was about 230 square meters. It seems that the layout of the suites on this floor should be similar. You know, these bad guys are the most concerned about face. Arranging a good room for others and a bad room for them is like slapping their faces. After walking into the room, Jiang Hai was just about to speak, but Azalina gestured to Jiang Hai to be silent. Then she searched the whole room, searched every corner, and found 3 things as big as the battery in a quartz watch. Although Jiang Hai has never played with this kind of thing before, he also knew that this should be the legendary listening device. This place is really scary, now it's done. After opening the window and throwing the 3 listening devices outside, Azalina couldn't help but smile. It looks really dangerous here. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief, sat directly on the sofa over there, and then raised his head and said to Azalina. It's okay, they won't dare to do anything to you. After all, you are both Wuxia and from the United States. Except for some desperados, basically no one dares to not give you face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina smiled, and then sat directly in Jiang Hai's arms. That's true. Listening to Azalina's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. She was right, after all, Russia was the big brother of Wuxia. Although there were many conflicts between them, for example, people in the northeast hated Russians. But in terms of international relations, the 2 sides were in the same boat. The people on the Soviet side would definitely not harm Jiang Hai. And Jiang Hai was from the United States, so the people on the United States side would not harm Jiang Hai, so Jiang Hai was still quite safe to some extent. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai patted Azalina's butt. If there was no one who would harm him, then it didn't matter. Are you hungry? Let's take a break and go down to eat. When Jiang Hai and the others took the plane, it was noon. Now that they were here, it was just the time for dinner in the afternoon. To be honest, Jiang Hai really wanted to taste the food here in Wulan. Well, okay, let's go after I tidy up my things. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also said with a smile. Then she walked into the room, and after tidying up her luggage, she closed the windows. Then she deliberately pulled out a few strands of hair and put them in the window position. At the same time, she also clipped some pieces of paper in the position of the ventilation holes. Finally, she held the hair and motioned Jiang Hai to go out first. Then she tidied up at the door, and then went downstairs with Jiang Hai. Looking at her movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but grin. Why did she give Jiang Hai a very dangerous feeling? After all, these things were only seen in spy movies in the past. It's really scary to talk about it. However, Jiang Hai didn't stop her. Safety is the first priority when going out. Then Jiang Hai and Azalina went to the restaurant downstairs, where they saw the fat man again. In addition, there were many people with bodyguards in this restaurant, but these people were sitting in the distance or in private rooms. They looked very mysterious, and no one was too close. Jiang Hai also chose a seat far away. After ordering the dishes, they started eating. After dinner, the 2 went upstairs again and checked again. After confirming that there was no problem, Azalina let Jiang Hai into the house. She had to admit that this kind of life is really exciting. After Jiang Hai entered the room, he took a shower first, then wore a bathrobe and watched TV in the hall. But at this time, a knock on the door sounded. Azalina stood up and went to take a look. It's two men, one is Kurol, and the other one I don't know, but he may be his boss. Glancing at the two people outside, Azalina turned her head and looked at Jianghu. Hearing her words, Jianghu also sat up and tidied up his bathrobe. Chapter 733. Open the door. With Jianghu's order, Azalina also opened the door and nodded to the two people outside. Hello, my name is Vladimir Dmitry Cernusborovic. Is Mr. Jianghu living in this room? Seeing the door open, another man said in a deep voice. Please come in. Listening to his self-introduction, Azalina nodded, then motioned for the two to come in. The two walked into the room under the guidance of Azalina and saw Jianghu, who had already stood up to greet them. Welcome, welcome, I didn't know you were coming now, I'm sorry, I just took a shower. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jianghu said with a smile, walked over and shook hands with them, and at the same time, observed the situation of the newcomer. This newcomer is also a typical Slav, but he doesn't look young, almost 40 or 50 years old. He can be considered a middle-aged man, but his body is very good and even exudes a sense of majesty. Jianghu can see at a glance that this should be a soldier. It doesn't matter, it is the greatest respect to meet guests here without any precautions. While shaking hands with Jianghu, the middle-aged man also said with a smile. Speaking of which, Jianghu is their rich man, they don't want to offend Jianghu. Come, sit here. Listening to the other party's words, Jianghu smiled, then led the two to the study room. After sitting down as the host and guest, the two exchanged a few pleasantries, then the middle-aged man moved on to the main topic. I'd better explain my purpose of coming here. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Vladimir Dmitry Cernusborovic. You can call me Vladimir, or Borovic, both are fine. I came here mainly to collect a deposit from you. Since he got straight to the point, the man was not polite and directly explained his purpose of coming here. He came to ask for money. Deposit? Jianghu was a little surprised when he heard these words. He knew what a deposit was. This item had actually appeared in auctions. At auctions, the items that were auctioned were basically all of the best quality. Naturally, the price was not cheap, and the people at the auction were also afraid that someone would randomly bid and buy. If that happened, it would be troublesome. Therefore, before the auction, they would collect a certain amount of deposit from these auction guests, which was similar to a deposit. Of course, the value of the deposit was quite expensive. Although Jianghu did not pay a deposit when he participated in the auction before, after all, he was the seller. If he bought something, the auction house could directly deduct it from his money, but other guests could not. According to Jianghu's understanding, the minimum deposit for the auctions he had participated in was $5 million. If you bought something worth less than $5 million, it would be deducted directly from the $5 million. If you bought something worth more than $5 million, it would be deducted directly. If you bought something worth more than $5 million, then you would need to transfer the money to the auction house within a certain period of time. If you did not transfer the money within a certain period of time, then the money would belong to the auction house, and you would not be able to keep the item. This was legally binding. Of course, if you did not buy anything, then all the money would be returned to you when you left. This was inevitable. However, Jianghu didn't expect that buying people would require a deposit. Moreover, he didn't know much about this market. According to the people on the other side, they didn't have a low deposit. You have to pay a deposit to be able to buy things within this amount, and you can't go beyond that. How much is the deposit? Jianghu glanced at Azalina beside him. It could be seen that she was also a little flustered. She didn't know about this. Looking at her appearance, Jianghu couldn't help but smile. Then, he turned to Boris and asked. It's up to you. Different grades of goods have different values, but don't worry, our auction will not collect taxes, and we will not cheat your money. After all, the nature of this auction is national. Looking at Jianghu, Boris said with a smile. Then I understand. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai gestured to Azalina beside him. After she went out for a while, she came back with Jiang Hai's wallet. Jiang Hai took out a check from the wallet. Almost all of his money was deposited in the American Express Bank. He was too lazy to apply for too many cards. One bank card was enough. He did not believe that the American Express Bank would go bankrupt. Holding the check, Jiang Hai wrote something on it, then handed it to Boryevich in front of him. $50 million? That's a lot. Looking at the number given by Jiang Hai, Boris couldn't help but be stunned, then he said with a smile. They are most willing to see such a big customer. Obviously, Jiang Hai belongs to the nouveau riche in their eyes. After Curly took the check, he went to the back to make a phone call. He wanted to confirm the authenticity of the check. Money has never been a problem for me. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled, then put away the wallet. No problem. At this time, Curly, who had seen him once, had also finished the phone call. He walked to Boris and whispered. Hearing his words, Boris also stood up and took the initiative to stretch out his hand. He had finished his business and was about to leave. I hope you have a good memory in Ulan. Jiang Hai also stood up and shook hands with him. Holding Jiang Hai's hand, Boris also said with a smile. Hearing his words, although Jiang Hai was wondering what the hell was going on, he still had a smile on his face. After seeing the two off, Jiang Hai looked at Azalina. Obviously, this little girl was also a little confused at this time. Speaking of which, although Azalina has seen a lot of storms, to be honest, she has not been in contact with too many high-level things. In their organization, the highest officer she has ever seen is a major, and other than that, they are their instructors. After leaving the organization, she met Jiang Hai. The number of times she has seen a check in her life can be counted with two hands. She has never been to places like the auction house, so she is also a little confused. Looking at her cute appearance, Jiang Hai walked over with a smile and rubbed her face hard. Now that you have thought about it for me, is there anything else you want to tell me? Looking at Azalina, Jiang Hai asked her. No, I don't know. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Azalina first said no, but then maybe she remembered what happened just now, so she said a little embarrassedly. Looking at her, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This girl is really, forget it, protect me well, leave the rest to me. Patting her head, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Azalina couldn't help but bite her lips lightly. She instantly rushed to Jiang Hai's body and pressed her lips against Jiang Hai's. Then the two walked a few rounds and came to the master bedroom. When the sun shone into the bedroom the next day, Jiang Hai was also woken up by the urge to urinate. Glancing at Azalina, who was still sleeping in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but cover his head and laugh. Last night, they should have done it together. But they didn't, because Azalina refused Jiang Hai on the grounds that they couldn't do it during the mission. In the end, she helped Jiang Hai with her mouth. But Jiang Hai had nothing to be dissatisfied with, and then the two fell asleep together. They slept until today. If it was in some other city, Jiang Hai would definitely go out for a walk today for the auction tomorrow. But not today. After Jiang Hai and the others got up in the morning, they washed up and went downstairs to have breakfast. As for why they didn't call for breakfast, that was because they didn't know which force the person who delivered breakfast was from. You don't know if they will attack you here, or if they will plant a bug or something like that. You have to be careful. After going downstairs for breakfast, Jiang Hai and the others returned to the room to surf the internet and watch TV. The TV was all in Russian. Jiang Hai really couldn't understand it. There weren't even subtitles. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only surf the internet helplessly. After spending the morning in boredom, they went to have lunch at noon. After spending the afternoon in boredom, they went to have dinner. Just like that, the day passed. Of course, in fact, it was impossible for the day to pass so easily. Jiang Hai was really bored. But fortunately, he used to be a homebody, so he could endure it. After the day passed, he went to the auction. The auction time was at 8:00 in the evening. Jianghu and the others didn't have anything to prepare, so they stayed in the room for the day. At 3:00 in the afternoon, Kirili came and told Jianghu the time to go down. After all, the things being auctioned this time were a bit inhumane. The people who came to the auction were not good people. If there was a conflict or someone had a grudge against someone, it would be troublesome. Therefore, the time to attend the event was fixed. There was only a total of 5 minutes of buffer time. Jianghu went to the elevator at around 7:00 in the afternoon. The auction venue was on the top floor of the hotel. They didn't have to go out, and it was very convenient. At 7:00 in the evening, Jianghu and Azalina left their room. Kirili had been waiting outside for a long time. When he saw Jianghu and Azalina come out, Kirili led them to the elevator. Then they went straight to the top floor. Jianghu took a look. It was worthy of being called a top-level auction. There were no seats here. Everyone was in a private room. Jianghu and the others had to enter a separate room. There was a huge sofa in the room, and there were all kinds of wine, drinks, and fruits. There was also a separate bathroom. It was enough for people to stay here for a few hours without being bored. One of the walls in the room was made of single-sided glass. In front of the glass was a high platform. All the rooms were designed in this way. When all the rooms were added together, they formed a circle. After a while, the auction item would appear on the high platform. Then the platform would rotate, allowing all the buyers to see the auction item clearly. As for the bidding, it was controlled by a tablet in front of the sofa. On the tablet, you could check the information of the auction item, the next auction item, and the following auction items. At the same time, you could also increase the bid and enter the price. It was obvious that in the eyes of these people, the girls were really just their merchandise, not people. Jianghu was not a saint, but at this time, he was also a little uncomfortable. After all, he didn't feel comfortable seeing people being casually auctioned off on the stage, just like the cattle he had bought. But fortunately, he quickly adjusted his state of mind. He sat on the sofa and ate the fruits. It would be a waste if he didn't eat them. He didn't touch the wine because he didn't like drinking very much. Besides, he had to stay awake. At this time, Azalina was not sitting next to Jianghu. She had been standing at the door. According to her, this was her duty. While Jianghu was eating happily, a voice suddenly came from all directions into Jianghu's ears. "Ladies and gentlemen, our auction is about to start." After the English with a strong Soviet-Russian accent entered Jianghu's ears, he got up and went to the bathroom to wash his hands. After that, he came back and looked at the space in front of him. After all, what was being sold here was not ordinary goods, but people. Therefore, there was no auctioneer here, and no one would come to adjust the atmosphere. After the voice ended, every minute, another voice would tell Jianghu when the auction would start. 5 minutes later. When the high platform in front of him suddenly descended, Jianghu knew that the auction had started. So he took the tablet and walked to the window. To be honest, it was the first time he had seen an auction like this. It was impossible to say that he wasn't nervous. After less than 10 seconds, the high platform rose again. But after it rose, a woman was standing on the high platform. This woman was quite beautiful. In Jianghu's opinion, she would score at least 75 out of 100. She was only slightly less beautiful than Aphrodite and the others. It could be said that such a woman could be put on the domestic internet and be called a goddess. But this was only the first item. The first item, codename Web Spider 7A91, age 21, blood type O, height 178 centimeters, weight 110 pounds, measurements 92, 61, and 89 cm. Received training at the age of 6 and graduated at the age of 17. Mission completion rate, C level 3, D level 17. Killed 6 enemies. Skills, close combat, disguise, spy, firearms proficiency. Non-C level, starting price, $112,000. Each bid must be no less than $5,000. Begin. As the voice rang out, the tablet in front of Jianghu showed the girl's situation. As the voice rang out, the girl on the high platform also took off the few clothes on her body. As the high platform slowly rotated, she also showed herself. Seeing this scene, Jianghu couldn't help but frown. Chapter 734. Is everyone like this in this auction? And what's the meaning of the web spider? Jianghu asked with some doubts as he looked at the woman on the high platform in front of him. She was slowly doing some yoga-like movements to show off her body. To be honest, he would definitely feel uncomfortable if his future woman were to be seen naked in front of him. I'm not very sure. I've never participated in such an auction before, but it might be like this. After all, after these people are bought, not only will they become killing weapons, but they also need to serve the buyer. So you can see their specialties, they all have bedroom skills. Speaking of this, Azalina was also a little embarrassed, but she also knew that what she said was true. As for the web spiders, it's our classification. Spiders are the lowest level and are responsible for spying and intelligence. Those who disguise themselves as people in certain special professions are called web spiders because they are responsible for weaving webs. The main assassination spiders are poisonous spiders because assassinations are unscrupulous, and they even need to poison their own bodies. The ones who deal with the enemy head-on are called wolf spiders. If they accumulate enough experience, their code name will evolve from spider to the next stage, wolf. When they become wolves, they are divided into alpha wolf, combat wolf, auxiliary wolf, and so on. After becoming wolves, they will complete certain tasks and reach a certain level of strength, and they will advance to become double-headed eagles. Although it was not appropriate to talk about the previous topic with Jianghu, this classification was not a problem, so Azalina quickly explained it. What level were you before you left? Listening to Azalina's words, Jianghu asked with some doubts. I was a double-headed eagle. Speaking of this, Azalina was quite proud. After all, double-headed eagle is the highest level. There are a total of 12 double-headed eagle members in this organization. Every time one of them dies or betrays us, there will be someone to replace them. Looking at Jianghu's puzzled look, Azalina continued. Hearing her words, Jianghu also expressed that he understood. Is there a double-headed eagle in the auction this time? Jianghu continued to ask while looking at Azalina in front of him. As far as I know, when I left the organization, 9 of the 12 double-headed eagles also left the organization. That's why the organization didn't have time to catch us. After all, double-headed eagles represent the top agents, so the remaining 3 seem to have become the bodyguards of the high-ranking officials of Wulan City. Moreover, people with such abilities wouldn't be willing to be auctioned here like objects, so at most, there would only be some wolf-level agents here. Azalina shook her head gently when she heard Jianghu's words. Hearing her words, Jianghu also expressed that he understood. While they were chatting, the first girl's auction ended. In the end, the girl was sold for $172,000. After confirming that the girl had been sold, the voice congratulated the guest in box 17, and the girl descended from the platform. After more than 10 seconds, the platform rose again. This time, another girl appeared on it. However, this girl was different from the previous one. Is this an Asian? Jianghu actually didn't know what kind of woman she was. Her skin was a little dark, but she didn't look like a black person. She had long black hair and looked a little like a Wuxia person, but Jianghu was very sure that she wasn't a Wuxia person. Instead, she looked like a Insan person. Unlike a Insan person, Jianghu couldn't tell where she was from. The girl looked like she was only about 1.6 meters tall. Compared to the 1.78 meter tall foreign woman, she was far worse. But the girl herself was like an unsheathed sword. Standing there, Jianghu felt a sense of danger. The second lot, code-named Tarantula 3C74, age 18 years old, blood type AB, height 158 centimeters, weight 92 pounds, 3 measurements 88, 57, 84 centimeters, cm, began training at the age of 4 and graduated at the age of 17. Mission completion rate, A rank 1, B rank 15, C rank 33, D rank 7. Killed 87 enemies. Skills, Master of Close Combat, Disguise, Proficient in Defense, Proficient in Firearms. C. Starting price, $380,000, each bid must not be less than $10,000. Begin. As the girl appeared, the voice sounded again, and Jianghu also looked at the girl with some surprise. It seems that this girl is very powerful. I've heard of this girl. She is a Samoan, the strongest ethnic group in the world. Her close combat ability should not be weaker than me or Belle. Looking at Jianghu with some doubts, Azalina also explained. The strongest ethnic group in the world? Hearing this title, Jianghu couldn't help but be a little confused. He really didn't know what the strongest ethnic group in the world was. Then he picked up the tablet in front of him. There was detailed information about this girl on it, and naturally, there was also information about her ethnic group. Indeed, the Samoans were recognized as the strongest ethnic group in the world. This ethnic group only had 220,000 people, and they were a mixture of the Southern Mongolians and the Australians. They were a branch of the Polynesians, and this ethnic group with only 220,000 people was famous for being strong in the world of fighting. Many ferocious fighting beasts emerged. For example, the famous Dwayne Johnson was a Samoan. Now in the WWE, there are also many players from Samoans, including the current top player, Roman Reigns. But don't think that these people only know how to perform. The men of this ethnic group are all warriors, and the women are also semi-warriors. Purely in terms of fighting, without using weapons, this ethnic group is the only existence that can compete with the fighting ethnic group. This is not a joke. This can be seen from the situation of this girl. She is not as good looking as the Caucasian just now, and she is not as tall and white, but she is priced at $380,000. This is only the starting price, which is enough to show how strong this person is. And most importantly, this ethnic group values virginity very much, so the people of this ethnic group can't be poisonous spiders or web spiders here. They can only be tarantulas, but they are the most reassuring tarantulas. Just like now, although the girl was taking off her clothes during the introduction, she left the two most basic pieces of clothing, so that they wouldn't all be naked. When Jianghu saw this, he felt a little better. Can I buy her? To be honest, Jianghu is still quite interested in this girl. He turned his head and asked Azalina. Of course, this is not a problem. Hearing Jianghu's words, Azalina immediately said. Although the main purpose of her coming here is to save her sisters, if Jianghu has his eyes on something, she naturally won't say anything. Well, then buy it. Looking at the price of $10,000 that popped up from time to time on the tablet, Jianghu smiled, then directly entered the price of $500,000 in the input column, and Jianghu clicked send. All the tablets in the private rooms showed that the girl's price had risen to 500,000 yuan. To be honest, once it reached 500,000, those people withdrew their hands. It was not worth spending 500,000 on such a girl. Congratulations to the guest in room 8, you have won the second auction item. This was another web spider, Slavic, Nancy. Jianghu was not very interested in her. In the end, she was sold for $168,000. However, Jianghu was a little interested in the fourth item because it was a venomous spider. The fourth auction item, code name Venomous Spider 4B36, age 20 years old, blood type B, height 172 centimeters, weight 105 pounds, measurements 108, 62, 94 cm, received training at the age of 8, graduated at the age of 18. Mission completion rate, B level 19, C level 23, D level 7. Enemies killed 46. Skills, close combat, disguise, spy, assassination, firearms proficiency. C level, starting price, $210,000, each bid must be no less than $5,000. Begin. Following the host's words, the girl on the high platform also took off her clothes. However, she did not take off all her clothes like the web spider, nor did she leave 2 pieces of clothing like the tarantula. She took off almost all her clothes, but there were 2 pads on her upper body and a bra on her lower body. As soon as she took off her upper body, her 108 centimeters figure suddenly jumped out. After all, she was still young, so a 108 centimeters figure could still be quite firm. This made Jianghu a little confused for a moment. To be honest, this girl was not bad, even prettier than the first web spider. According to Jianghu's standards, she was already 80 points, but that terrifying upper body instantly added at least 15 points. It was so big and firm. How did she do it? Moreover, such a beauty was actually a sea level. This made Jianghu a little confused. It seemed that she really had some tricks up her sleeve. As the host began to descend, the price of the girl continued to rise. After looking at it, Jianghu entered $500,000 in the column and sent the bid out. Unlike the last time when Jianghu bought the girl, although everyone was stunned for a moment, someone soon bid again. It was obvious that Jianghu was not the only one who had taken a fancy to this 108. But competing with Jianghu in terms of money? Jianghu doesn't have much, but he is rich. He was not targeting the people in the boxes, but saying that the people in the boxes were all trash. Of course, in terms of fighting bravely, fighting with subordinates, and competing with territory, Jianghu was no match for these people at all. But now that they were playing a civilized game of dollar, Jianghu was absolutely crushing. Looking at the number that was still rising, Jianghu's second input was 1 million. Sure enough, after this number appeared, everyone quieted down. Congratulations to the guest in Box 8 for purchasing the 4th auction item for $1 million. However, Jianghu's extravagance clearly made the host very happy. Her voice, which had not changed much, became a little louder. Then, the girl bowed to Jianghu and went down again. To be honest, Jianghu was not interested in the next auction item. Most of them were web spiders. Occasionally, there were some wolf spiders and poisonous spiders, but to be honest, the wolf spiders were not very good looking. Each and every one of them was tall and sturdy. They could be used as bodyguards, but Jianghu didn't only want them to be bodyguards. The most beautiful one was only around 60 points in Jianghu's eyes, so he let it go. As for the poisonous spiders, they were indeed good looking. Basically, they were around 80 points, which meant that they weren't inferior to Aphrodite and the others. Unfortunately, these poisonous spiders weren't C grade. Therefore, Jianghu was not interested in them. The same was true for the web spiders. After a glance, Jianghu did not have the urge to buy them. Box 8 fell silent just like that, but the other families were fiercely fighting. The first stage of the auction ended 3 hours after it started. There were a total of 181 auction items. Jianghu won 2 of them, but he spent $1.5 million. Among all the people, he could be ranked in the top 10. After all, the average web spiders were sold for less than 200,000, and the average poisonous spiders were sold for less than 500,000. The price of the wolf spiders fluctuated between 400,000 and 800,000, mainly depending on the use of these people. For example, Jianghu was just curious about the people who bought them. After all, there were only a few people who bought the wolf spiders to kill people. The first stage of our auction has come to an end. We will rest for an hour before the second auction. During this time, we will send the people who finished the first stage to you for the handover. At this time, the voice sounded again. After that, the surroundings fell into silence. Jianghu walked back to the sofa and continued to eat fruit. But before he could eat for too long, there was a knock on the door. Azalina opened the door and a man walked to the door with 2 women. After motioning for the 2 women to enter, Azalina closed the door again. "Boss, the 2 people you just bid on are here." Hearing the knock on the door, Jianghu had already noticed it. Now that he looked back, he saw the 2 people he just bid on. At this time, they were standing in front of the door. When they saw Jianghu looking over, they also bowed respectfully. No matter what happened in the future, at least for now, they were the personal belongings of the man in front of them. Well, they're here. Looking at the two people, Jianghu also stood up. After he went to the bathroom to wash his hands, he walked in front of the two people. Just now, he was still a little far away. Now that he was looking at her from a closer distance, he had to admit that this tarantula was indeed very delicate. Just now, she was a little dark, but now, she was definitely a dark and charming existence. Just by looking at her appearance, her score might be much higher than before. At this time, she was also curiously sizing up Jianghu, her new master. Chapter 735. As for the other spider, a look of satisfaction flashed in Jianghu's eyes. Just now, it looked so big from the outside, but now it's even bigger. Feeling Jianghu's gaze, the spider also smiled and stretched out its hand towards Jianghu's hand. Seeing her move, Azalina also stepped forward for a while to prevent her from doing anything else, but she didn't stop. She just pulled Jianghu's hand, then used her other hand to look down at the clothes she was wearing, and the two sturdy lumps that were just displayed popped out. "You are my master, you can try it any time and anywhere." Speaking in a rather unfluent Wuxia Mandarin, the woman said with a smile, then pressed Jianghu's hand on a certain place that can't be described. Feeling the softness in his hand, Jianghu really felt very good. Moreover, since she said so, Jianghu didn't hold back. His other hand also climbed to a higher position, constantly changing their shape. Seeing that Jianghu was having fun, the spider also led Jianghu to sit on the sofa. Lying in Jianghu's arms, she let Jianghu change the shape of her hand. He has to admit that there are many women around Jianghu, but this is the first time he has seen such a big one. It's really interesting. He feels that he can play with this thing for a year. The tarantula stood quietly beside Azalina. She knew that her duty was different. When people are playing with something seriously, they feel that time is really different. For example, now, Jianghu is playing so seriously. Therefore, an hour passed really quickly. After a short while, the lights on the high platform outside lit up again. The second phase, which was also the most important phase, had begun. Looking at the lights outside, Jianghu also moved all his attention away from the sturdy woman in front of him. One of his hands was still there, while the other took out the tablet, then he watched it at any time. But this time, he didn't go to the window. Now, the second stage of the auction begins. Please get ready, the first product will be displayed. As the voice fell, the high platform fell in the next second. When it rose again, another woman stood on it, but compared to the spider series, this woman was much more tightly dressed. She was nearly 1.8 meters tall, had a delicate face, and wore a black tights that outlined her body completely. He had to admit that this woman's figure was very good. Her upper body was obviously smaller than the tarantula in his arms, but she was much bigger than the average woman. Her face was also quite good. Her blonde hair was tied into a ponytail and placed behind her head. Her delicate facial features gave Jianghu a good first impression, but at this time, her face was quite ugly. After all, for agents of their level, they had been brainwashed. They had already broken away from the organization's brainwashing and had their own thoughts. Normal people would not be willing to be sold as goods. But as a member of the organization, they didn't have the ability to resist. After all, the organization was so big, and only a few people from the double-headed eagle successfully left in the end. People under the eaves sometimes had to bow their heads. This time's auction item, code-named Song Lang 33-4, age 22, blood type A, height 181 centimeters, weight 115 pounds, measurements 97, 62, 90 cm, received training at the age of 5, graduated at the age of 16. Mission completion, 18 times A, 29 times B, 13 times C, 2 times D, 161 enemies killed. Skills: close combat, disguise, intelligence probing, assassination, vehicle proficiency, fire control proficiency, firearms proficiency. C. Starting price: $2-3 million. Each bid must be no less than $50,000. Begin. After this person's introduction, many people began to bid, and Jiang Hai looked at Azalina. What does this Tsong Lang mean? Looking at Azalina, Jiang Hai asked her. In the beginning, the people who graduated from the organization were all at the spider level, but because of different learning, the division of labor in the organization was also different, but whether it was web spiders, poisonous spiders, or wolf spiders, they all have the possibility of advancing, but in the spider stage, they do tasks separately, and after reaching a certain level and completing a certain task, they will advance into wolves, and wolves fight in groups, so they will form teams. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also explained to Jiang Hai. In the team, the leader is generally a person who evolved from a poisonous spider, called the alpha wolf, and is the captain of the whole team. Then, there will be Tsong Lang, and tail wolf. Tsong Lang is basically an evolution from web spiders, and their main purpose is spying and intelligence. Tsong Lang is basically an evolution from a wolf spider, and when it comes to support, anything is possible. This person is the Tsong Lang of Team 33. After hearing Azalina's introduction, Jiang Hai nodded and then gestured to Azalina to buy this person. I'm not very familiar with this person. Unfortunately, this person was not Azalina's target, so she shook her head gently, meaning to let Jiang Hai do as he pleased. She knew that Jiang Hai had taken a fancy to see, this person's ability is very good, but her personality is not very good, and her temper is quite bad. I don't know if Master has the confidence to subdue her. Listening to Azalina's indifference, and Jiang Hai did not speak, Poisonous Spider, who had just joined them, said with a smile. Jiang Hai had to admit that she was very good at reading people's body language. She knew that whether it was Azalina's rank or position by Jiang Hai's side, she was much higher than her. So when Azalina spoke, she would not speak. Now that everyone was quiet, she would say something to Jiang Hai. Very bad temper? Personality? Listening to her words, Jiang Hai really did not expect her to know so much, so he continued to rub the thing in his hand while asking her. Her personality is very similar to a girl's personality. Her personality is very much like a boy's, she doesn't care about trifles. When she was in the training camp, she once contradicted the instructor for her friend. Her strength is not bad, but after a mission, because she offended the instructor, she was arranged to become a web spider. However, without losing her virginity, she managed to find out a lot of information. After finding out the information, she even completed an A-rank mission. Later, she was chosen by the organization and was promoted to the wolf pack. However, she is very arrogant, so if you want to subdue her, you have to convince her wholeheartedly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Poisonous Spider laughed and introduced her. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also glanced at this woman. She looks really interesting. But when it comes to assassination, Jiang Hai may not be able to do it, but when it comes to force, can an earthling be his opponent? Well, the current Jiang Hai is already beyond the scope of ordinary earthlings. Well, let me see how arrogant she is. Picking up the tablet and placing it on Poisonous Spider's stomach, she held her breath in an instant. She has to admit that this woman is very good, at least in terms of reading people's minds and eyesight, she is the best. 4-5 million. Anyway, Jiang Hai is not short of money. Since this person is really capable, he will not care. Taking a look, the current price is about 4-1 million, which is already rising very slowly. Jiang Hai directly entered a slightly rounded number. As soon as the price of $4-5 million was entered, the other rooms were quiet this time. After a few seconds, no one increased the price, and the voice also announced that Jiang Hai had won another person. When the man heard that he was bought by the 8th private room, he just turned his head and glanced at Jiang Hai's private room. He didn't bow like the other two. He just glanced at Jiang Hai's private room coldly, then went down with the elevator. Interesting. Looking at such a proud person, Jianghu also smiled, then licked his lips gently. As the tablet was taken away, the poisonous spider in his arms smiled and moved again. Not long after, the second item appeared. This was a support wolf, which is the evolution of the tarantula. To be honest, Jianghu couldn't stand it, because although this woman is also a woman, she is not that good looking. This was a woman who should also be a Samoan. She was about 1.9 meters tall and was even more muscular than a man. It was really hard to tell if she was a man or a woman. However, this person's price started at $4.7 million. Because after graduating from the training camp, this guy is the strongest. He has killed a total of 712 people and completed 375 A-level missions. This person used to be one of the candidates for the double-headed eagle. I didn't expect that he would be willing to be sold as a commodity. Looking at the guy in front of her who looks more like a man than a woman, Azalina obviously knows him. It can't be helped. In order to create this strong body, she made a lot of poisonous things. Now she is addicted to them. Being a normal bodyguard can't help her maintain this strength, so she has to find those people to rely on, and she has to find a rich person to rely on. Hearing Azalina's words, the poisonous spider on the other side also said helplessly. The next few, there are support wolves, tail wolves, everything, but none of them caught Jianghu's eye, and none of them caught Azalina's eye. When it comes to this poisonous spider, after every woman came on stage, he will introduce them to Jianghu. It seems that his ability to collect information is really good. While thinking about something that can't be described, Jianghu was thinking, if he can really subdue her, then he doesn't know if she is reliable enough to investigate the information about sex. Boss, the first one is here. Just as Jianghu was thinking about it, Azalina's voice sounded. Then Jianghu looked over and saw a woman slowly rising on the high platform. This woman is about 1.75 meters tall, with a head of reddish-brown hair and delicate facial features. She is a typical Slavic, and her beauty is very eye-catching. She has big blue eyes and a sharp chin. She looks very beautiful and has a good figure. Although it is not that exaggerated, it is not bad either. Looking at Azalina's slightly excited expression, he looked at this person's information. Code name, Alpha Wolf. 14-1, age, 26 years old. Blood type, AB. Height, 176 centimeters. Weight, 121 pounds. Measurements, 93, 63, 90 cm. Started training at the age of 7. Graduated at the age of 16. Mission completion, A level 31, B level 72, C level 8, D level 16. 361 enemies killed. Skills, close combat, disguise, intelligence detection, assassination, vehicle proficiency, fire control proficiency, firearms proficiency, electronics proficiency. Starting price, $3 million. Each bid must be no less than $50,000. Looking at this person's data on the tablet, Jianghu was a little surprised. An alpha wolf is indeed different. This price is much higher than that of the guy who is neither male nor female. There are only a total of 38 wolf squads in the organization. Those who can become alpha wolves are the top people, and she is the top existence. Hearing Jianghu's words, Azalina said with a serious face. Jianghu also looked at the girl in the middle. He had to admit that an alpha wolf was treated much better than regular wolves and spiders. She didn't have to show her body. After she came up, she just stood there and rotated with the platform, not moving at all. But after a glance at the tablet, one would find that this woman's price was rapidly increasing. It soon rose to $8.9 million. After a moment of hesitation, it instantly rose to $9.1 million. It was obvious that these people knew what was good for them. An alpha wolf was not to be missed. Unfortunately, their opponent today is Tycoon Jianghu. In the input column, Jiang Hai gently pressed it. Then, he pressed a word, followed by 7 zeros. 10 million. $10 million. Jiang Hai confirmed and sent out the message. Box 8, $10 million. After this number was sent out, the other boxes fell silent. Jiang Hai was also waiting for someone to bid. Unfortunately, $10 million wasn't a small number for anyone. Jiang Hai didn't really care. Maybe it was because the money came too quickly. $10 million was nothing to Jiang Hai. He really didn't care much about this. Congratulations, room 8, $10 million for this item. After waiting for about 30 seconds and confirming that no one else was going to raise the price, the calm voice announced loudly. Azalina was obviously relieved when she heard the voice. For her, the purpose of her coming here was to save these people who were familiar with her. If these people can be saved, then this is good news. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was sitting there, her face showed a happy smile. Jiang Hai is really awesome, winning at the start. Looking at her smiling face, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. Don't tell me that after saving these girls, they will work for him. Even if they didn't work for him, given his friendship with Azalina, he didn't really care about saving tens of millions of dollars. Chapter 736. After bidding for the girl, Jiang Hai continued to sit there, watching the auction that was still going on in front of him. In fact, Jiang Hai didn't care if he spent all his money. If he spent almost all his money, someone would naturally come and tell Jiang Hai. Besides, he didn't care about money in the first place. When it comes to money, especially cash, he really isn't afraid of anyone. How many more people are going to be auctioned next? Looking at Azalina, Jiang Hai asked her. 2 more, the rest is up to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina thought for a while and said. Okay, let's wait and see. Hearing Azalina's words, Jiang Hai also nodded and continued to look at the high platform in front of him. After he bought the alpha wolf, the second one that appeared was still a secondary wolf, the kind that looks very manly. So Jiang Hai gave up after looking at it. He didn't have any special hobbies. By the way, are there only women in this organization, no men? I'm curious. While rubbing the poisonous spider's upper body, Jiang Hai asked Azalina. Having said that, he really hasn't seen a single man after so long. There are, but I don't know why there aren't any here. How can there be no men in an organization? Even in the movie Naked Fruit, there are some men who are instructors, let alone in this reality. In the real world, men are always much better than women in this regard, especially in combat. This is a congenital disadvantage. Perhaps women are better at collecting information than men, but when it comes to fighting, men are not comparable to women. There are also men being auctioned here, but it's not today. As far as I know, other than working, we also need to satisfy the needs of the owner if we sell to someone. Therefore, other than some men with special hobbies, I don't think anyone will buy a man. However, I heard that those rich ladies are quite attentive to this auction. Jiang Hai nodded when he heard the poison spider's words. Indeed, it was very comfortable to have such a beautiful woman lying in his arms, but if it was a man, while Jiang Hai was asking questions, a few more wolves were auctioned off. About 10 minutes later, another woman was auctioned off. At the sight of this woman, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. He was really good looking. Most importantly, he was a Wuxia. Why was he not a Korean or a Japanese? There's information below. This Wuxia woman didn't look very old. She had long black hair and wore a white windbreaker. She didn't have any expression on her face. To be honest, if this woman hadn't appeared here at this time, Jiang Hai would have almost thought that she was a celebrity. Because this woman was indeed quite good-looking. In terms of the aesthetics of Wuxia, she was quite good. Big slender eyes, long eyelashes, a tall nose, but not as big as a European or American, white and tender skin, plus a sharp chin. To be honest, this girl's appearance was more than 85 points in Jiang Hai's eyes. Compared with Feng Yunchen and others who relied on their looks to make a living, she was not inferior to Qi by much. She is also one of our targets. Just as Jiang Hai was about to bid for her, Azalina also spoke. Well, this time he had to bid even if he didn't want to, not to mention that Jiang Hai originally wanted to bid. At the same time, he lowered his head and looked at the woman's information. Code, Alpha Wolf 13-1, age 27, blood type O, height 171 centimeters, weight 112 pounds, measurements 88, 59, 86 cm, received training at the age of 5, graduated at the age of 16. Mission completion, 71 times A, 36 times B, 14 times C, 0 times D, 84 enemies killed. Skills, close combat, disguise, intelligence probing, assassination, vehicle proficiency, fire control proficiency, firearms proficiency, electronics proficiency, special, has a weakness, does not like to kill. C, because of this weakness. Starting price, $3 million, each bid must not be less than $50,000. Looking at the woman's information in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but secretly nod. Does not like to kill? Well, this point was actually a weakness here. However, it didn't matter to Jiang Hai. As the voice sounded, Jiang Hai also entered a number for the first time, 10 million. Yes, he bought the first alpha wolf for $10 million. This was also an alpha wolf, and it was Azalina who wanted it. If the price was too low, Jiang Hai would be embarrassed and directly bid 10 million. Anyway, it wasn't like he couldn't afford to spend that much money. Baka. Not long after the auction started, the number jumped to 10 million, and the bidder was still in room 8. On the other side, in room 17, a few yellow people couldn't help but roar, but from their words, it was obvious that these people were Japanese. At this time, in front of the leader of these Japanese people, a few women who had just won the auction were kneeling there, waiting for the leader of the Japanese people. I don't know if everyone still remembers, but room 17 was the one who bought the first web spider at the beginning. In addition to the first web spider, these people bought 11 women in the first round. Of course, they were of different categories. 6 of them were tarantulas, and they all looked like men. At this time, these 6 people were standing steadily in the distance. 3 of them were web spiders, and 2 were poison spiders. At this time, these 5 people were naked and lying in front of these men. For these women, these things were actually their daily lives. Spying for information, which place had the most information? The first was the nightclub, and the second was the green building. As a spy, using their own bodies to seduce those men to reveal their secrets was no big deal to them. Since they had been bought by these people, and the organization had already deducted the money, then at least for now, they belonged to these people. Just like Jiang Hai, it was inevitable to curry favor with these people. However, these people didn't come here just to buy some spiders. The wolves were their target, but no matter if it was a subordinate wolf, or a tail wolf, compared to the alpha wolf, they were more than one level lower. There were a total of 38 wolf teams in this organization. This meant that there were 38 alpha wolves. According to the news they received before, 12 of the 38 alpha wolves had already been divided among the country's upper echelons. Of the remaining 26, 4 had defected. Of the remaining 22, 18 were men, and only 4 were women. Therefore, these 4 wolves were also their targets. However, they didn't expect that 2 of them would be stopped by the person in room 8. $10 million wasn't a small number for these people. Thinking of this, these people couldn't help but look at the middle-aged man sitting in the middle and enjoying the service. This guy was their current leader. Raise the price. Because the security of these rooms was very good, their voices couldn't be heard outside. They stared at room 8 in the distance. They didn't know who was inside. In order to avoid any conflicts between the guests or competing for power, these people in Black Orchid had made strict preparations. However, this didn't stop them from hating on Jiang Hai and the others. 11 million. Hearing this person's words, the people here hesitated for a moment before giving a price that they could bear. As for Jianghu, when he saw the price jump, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, he casually gave a price of 12 million. It didn't matter to him if he increased the price by $1 million. He would earn it back in a few days. However, looking at Jianghu's number, the people here fell into deep thought again. These people from Japan were from the Yamaguchi organization. According to the exchange rate between dollars and yen, $1 was now equal to 101 yen, nearly 102 yen. Even if it was $100, $1 million was equivalent to 100 million yen. These people couldn't help but gasp at the shameless increase of 100 million yen. Although 100 million yen was nothing for the entire Yamaguchi organization, as the world's #1 gray, they had the capital to do so. But Fengyu wanted to control the whole of Japan. Their income was high, but they spent more. Russia, which was ranked second, had about 10% of Fengyu's annual income. Fengyu's annual income was about 10% of Fengyu's. $1 million was definitely not a small amount of income for them. Thinking of this, they were a little uncertain. Let's put this one down and talk about it next time. They couldn't accept spending 1.2 billion yen for a woman. After hesitating for a moment, the middle-aged man said. Then, the man nodded and gave up. As soon as the people here gave up, Jianghu's side directly accepted it. As the broadcast sounded, Jianghu accepted his fifth candidate, but this was not the last one. As time passed, after 5 or 6 people, another alpha wolf appeared on the high platform. Looking at this alpha wolf with Germanic blood, Jianghu smiled. 10 million. He felt that it was quite interesting to collect these alpha wolves. As the price of 10 million appeared, the other private rooms were speechless. Did he have to be so rich? $10 million at the drop of a hat. How shameless was he? For a moment, Private Room 8 really did become the public enemy, but would Jianghu care? Stop joking. 10 million. Asking if anyone wanted it. Finally, Private Room 17 followed suit and offered 11 million. However, Jianghu immediately offered 1,200. This time, Private Room 17 was scared again. Jianghu liked the feeling of crushing people with money. Give up. We'll fight him to the last one. Seeing Jianghu light up 12 million again, the middle-aged man seemed to be mentally prepared and directly said to his subordinate. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, this person also gave up. At the same time, they looked at the funds they prepared this time. They still had $21,875,000 left. Originally, they were going to use this money to buy 2 alpha wolves, but unexpectedly, 3 of them were taken away. This guy was really despicable. At the same time, this time, everyone began to pay attention to Private Room 8. Jianghu, who had bought 3 alpha wolves and spent more than $30 million, was very important in these people's eyes. A person who dared to spend more than $30 million to buy people was in these people's eyes. He had to have at least a few $1 billion, and he definitely didn't have an official background. Therefore, many people began to wonder about Jianghu's true identity in their minds. Jianghu's true identity was something that they should know. No one knew who was in this room now, but it didn't mean that no one would know in the future. At this moment, in the room, after seeing that Jianghu had bought 3 alpha wolves, a bush wolf, and 2 small spiders in the room, Azalina was a little worried. She was worried that Jianghu didn't have enough money. What should she do? Boss, do you have enough money? After hesitating for a moment, Azalina asked Jianghu in a low voice. Oh. You've spent enough? Hearing her words, Jianghu raised his head and glanced at her doubtfully, then calculated in his heart. According to Azalina, Jianghu's final goal was the remaining alpha wolf. But at this time, Jianghu really seemed to have spent most of his money. 3 alpha wolves, 10 million each, 12 million for 2, 34 million in total. The Samoan girl, 500,000. And the constantly changing girl in Jianghu's arms, 1 million, 35 million. Jianghu paid a deposit of $50 million, and he still had 14.5 million left. It seemed that the money to buy the last girl should be enough according to the previous price. But now that there was only one alpha wolf left, Jianghu felt that it was better to be safe. The deposit was very important. Glancing at the $14,500,000 in his account, Jianghu pressed the manual service button. "Hello sir, how can I help you?" After the button was pressed, it wasn't the sweet voice of the female attendant. Instead, a rough voice came out from the inside, asking Jianghu a question. "I want to increase the deposit." Listening to this man, Jianghu said with a smile. "Yes, we will arrange it for you right away." Hearing Jianghu's words, the man was taken aback. Obviously, he knew how much money Jianghu had in his account. He paid 50 million, and now he wants to pay a deposit. It seems that Jianghu is going to buy all the alpha wolves. At this time, Jianghu also took out his wallet. On the belly of the poisonous spider in front of him, Jianghu wrote down a number. 20 million. This should be foolproof. Then, he handed the check to Azalina. When the person comes later, she will naturally do it. Jianghu still has to look at the new products. If there is something he likes, he will naturally buy it. This feeling of spending money like water is great. Chapter 737. It is said that men become bad when they are rich. In fact, for Jianghu, this law was not necessarily true. This was because his personality wasn't set in stone. He was a rather jumpy person. According to the northeastern dialect, he would act as he pleased. He didn't have a fixed personality, even though he was already 28 years old. But sometimes he would behave very strangely. Most of the time, he was peaceful with Jianghu. He was not like the young people who talked about their dreams, ideals, and revenge all day long. His heart did not approve of these things. Country, people, hope, seeds, these high and mighty things, in general, had nothing to do with him. The only thing he needed to pay attention to was himself. He wanted himself to eat well, drink well, live well, play comfortably, and earn a lot of money. As for other things, he did not care. His personality was not high and mighty at all. Cough, of course, the last one referred to the seeds of the future. Anyway, it had nothing to do with something downloaded. In addition, he might have been used to being poor in the past. After he became rich, he did not show the feeling of a nouveau riche. He had a lot of money, but he did not buy too many luxury items, such as airplanes or sports cars. He could buy any sports car with his money, but he mainly drove his Shield. Of course, the Shield would not be cheaper than any sports car. But today, maybe it was because he spent money happily. In addition, this money, in a sense, was also necessary to spend. It made him have a desire to buy, but fortunately, he still remembered the main thing, so he did not buy too many people. At this time, he bought a total of 6 people, 3 alpha wolves, a bush wolf, a poisonous spider, and a tarantula. For now, he was quite satisfied. Jianghu casually changed some of the things in his hands into different shapes. He was also looking at the goods that would be auctioned later. To be honest, he felt a little unfortunate for these girls, but he could not change anything. The only thing he could do was to adapt to the world. Besides, he did not want to change anything. Not long after Jianghu served, there was a knock on the door. Azalina handed the check to the person who came over. After the person called to confirm, Jianghu's deposit increased from 50 million to 70 million, and the remaining money increased from 14.5 million to 34.5 million. In Jianghu's opinion, this money should be enough. After watching the auction all night, Jianghu was a little tired, so after Azalina paid the money, he handed her the tablet. Taking the tablet in Jianghu's hand, Azalina was a little confused. "Buy as much as you want, I'm a little tired." Hearing Jianghu's words, Azalina nodded gently, then took the tablet and observed it. She must buy the last alpha wolf, and in addition to this alpha wolf, if there was anyone she felt could be useful, she would also buy it. After Jiang Hai handed the tablet to Azalina, the poisonous spider, who had been curled up in Jiang Hai's arms, sat up and then knelt in front of Jiang Hai. Looking at her movements, Jiang Hai could not help but be a little confused. I have long felt that Master has a need in this area. Since Master is not going to auction anymore, let me serve Master. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the poisonous spider said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai did not have time to object. Why should he object? The poisonous spider on this side has already moved, releasing something that Jiang Hai can't describe. Then she gently opened her mouth. This is not the first time Jiang Hai has enjoyed this kind of service. After all, there are many in his family who can do this. But he has to admit that the poisonous spider in front of him is the biggest one Jiang Hai has ever seen. How big is this thing? It's not easy to buy a vest. Enjoying the service of the poisonous spider in front of him, Jiang Hai asked her. 40 it's really not easy to buy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the poisonous spider couldn't help but raise her head and wrinkle her cute nose and said to Jiang Hai. What about E? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little confused. What kind of terrifying number is this? In the past, he only knew D, C, and that number is not right, isn't it 36, 38? Not only E, but also F, G, and H, but those will affect the activity, and it's not worth it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the poisonous spider said with a smile, and Bo continued to lower his head and move. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded. You also go, massage the boss shoulders, if necessary, also serve him with your mouth. Hearing the conversation between Jiang Hai and the poisonous spider, Azalina glanced at the tarantula who has been standing next to her and said to her. Hearing Azalina's words, the tarantula also knew that Azalina is likely to be its immediate boss in the future, so it nodded and walked behind Jiang Hai. First, it let Jiang Hai's head lean on its chest, then it pressed Jiang Hai's shoulder with its hand. No matter what they are thinking at this time. But if they want to live, at least in Black Orchid, they have to treat Jiang Hai as their real master. After leaving Black Orchid. Let's see if Jiang Hai has the ability to subdue them. But according to Jiang Hai, it may be a little worse. But with Azalina around, he was not worried about this. After all, Azalina had said that she would solve these problems. Enjoying the service of the two, the auction continued. One by one, the auction items were collected by the people in the boxes. Soon, it was time for the last item to be auctioned. As the high platform slowly rose, Azalina's body could not help but tremble. Jiang Hai also looked at the high platform. Looking at the figure on the high platform, Jiang Hai's eyes could not help but light up. At this time, the figure on the high platform was not like the previous auction items, where she was standing on her own. She was tied to an iron frame, so her hands and feet were tied to the four corners of the iron bar. Her whole body was in the shape of an X. Her clothes were the simplest vest and underpants, and her skin was covered with many scars. It was obvious that she had expended a lot of effort to appear here. Even now, she was extremely unwilling to do so. After rising, this person's eyes followed the placement of the high platform and stared at the people in the boxes. To be honest, this person's eyes were very sharp. If she broke free from the iron bars at this time, she would definitely struggle and kill her way out. What surprised Jiang Hai even more was that this woman's appearance was really beautiful. Of course, her figure was also quite good. After all, it was impossible for this organization to train people who were too fat. These women were all special agents. Whether it was using their bodies to seduce or force, they could be strong, but they could not be fat. This was inevitable. Therefore, every one of them had a particularly good figure. As Jiang Hai looked at this woman who was like a wild wolf, he could not help but feel his waist tighten. Then, the poisonous spider who had served for so long also stopped. After about a while, she finished cleaning up, swallowed the food in her mouth, and stood up again. This is the last goal? Jianghu asked Azalina as he hugged the poisonous spider in front of him. Yes, this is the last goal, Azalina said excitedly when she heard Jianghu's words. At this time, the broadcast sounded and began to introduce this person's information. Code, Alpha 1-1, age 25, blood type O, height 176 centimeters, weight 121 pounds, measurements 93, 62, 96 cm. Started training at the age of 7, graduated at the age of 16. Mission completion, 168 times A, 136 times B, 0 times C, 0 times D, 1941 enemies killed. Skills, top close combat, disguise, spy, top assassination, vehicle proficiency, fire control proficiency, firearms proficiency, electronics proficiency, special, has a weakness that is very difficult to overcome. Starting price, $8 million, each bid must not be less than $100,000. Hearing this, Jianghu could not help but feel a little surprised. This person had such an obvious weakness, yet the price was still so high. It was amazing. This woman is famous for being crazy in the organization. She is very strong and is the strongest in all the teams. She is the first candidate of the 12 double-headed eagles. Originally, she was not going to participate in the auction. She was directly betrothed to a high-ranking official in Ulan, but that official wanted to do something to her on the night he received her. You know, in fact, women will have such a day sooner or later. It's the same no matter who it is given to, not to mention that the other party is your future master. However, she has a very strong temper and directly cut off that official's thing. So, you know, she was sent to the auction again. Hearing that Azalina had no intention of introducing this person, Poisonous Spider, who was in Jianghu's arms, could not help but speak to Jianghu. Hearing her words, Jianghu could not help but feel a little surprised and looked at Azalina. Don't tell me that this woman is going to do something to me. Azalina told me that I have to conquer their bodies first. Don't tell me that my big brother is going to leave me before I can conquer their bodies. Looking at Jianghu's puzzled eyes, Azalina smiled and said to Jianghu, leave these things to me. Then, she directly entered the price of $10 million on the screen, but this time, $10 million could not scare these people. Among the wolves in this organization, there were strong and weak ones. The further in front, the stronger the wolf. The strongest 12 small teams were also the core of the wolf pack, and the leader of the 12 small teams was naturally the strongest. Among the 12 teams, 11 alpha of the 12 teams were all men, and there was only one woman. Naturally, she was also everyone's target. Among the 3 alpha that Jianghu chose before, the Wuxia woman was 13-1, the Slavic woman was 14-1, and the Germanic man was 16-1. None of them were from the first 12 teams, but this woman was from the first team. So after Azalina called out $10 million, some people immediately followed suit, 11 million, 12 million, 15 million. It was not until the price rose to 17 million that their speed slowed down. The range was not so big, but it was still increasing by hundreds of thousands, 20 million. Looking at the rising price, Jianghu directly said to Azalina. Hearing Jianghu's words, Azalina also increased the price, $20 million. In an instant, the audience was silent again. $20 million for a person, these people's eyes were about to turn red. Baka, what is this guy doing? 20 million, does he think that money grows on trees? Looking at Jianghu's price, the Japanese in room 17 could not help but curse, and the guests in the other rooms were also a little hesitant. But after hesitating for a long time, the Japanese raised the price first, $21 million. It should be known that they only had $87 million in total, so 20 million was basically their bottom price. After they raised the price, about 2 seconds later, another room, which was actually filled with Mexicans, also raised the price, $5 million. It seemed that this number was basically their limit. Add another $300,000. Seeing that the person over there had made a bid, the Japanese man said with a gloomy face. Hearing his boss's words, before the Japanese man had the time to enter the bid, another number popped up from room number 8. 25 million. When this number appeared in this small space, it really crushed the audience in an instant. Almost all the people in the room were speechless. At this time, some people had already calculated that Jianghu had already spent $60 million to buy these people. $60 million, this was US dollars, not Japanese yen, not South Vietnamese dong, not South Korean dollars. Jianghu's direct money crush made these people a little confused. Those who had not been in this gray area might not be too clear about it. These people actually did not have much cash. Although each of them was worth billions, they also had a lot of things to spend on, such as firearms, local protection, and expenses for their subordinates. After all, in this line of work, if they did not drink and eat big bowls of meat, they would not live happily. If they made money like normal office workers, then what was the point of doing this? They had a lot of money to give to their subordinates. In addition, they had to buy property and buy goods, so they needed to use money to get through the joints. Therefore, they really didn't have a lot of cash in their hands. Usually, they could take out millions or tens of millions at once. That was already not easy. Now that they had gathered tens of millions to auction, it wasn't an easy thing to do. But at this time, Jianghu directly took out $60 million, which was really a crushing defeat. These people could take out more than $25 million. But what they had to consider was whether it was worth it to spend so much money, and whether it would affect their territory. After all, not everyone was like Jianghu. No matter how much money they earned, they would spend it themselves. Their families and businesses were big, so they could not afford it. Chapter 738. Mr. Jianghu, this way please. After knocking on the door, the person from the organization looked at Jianghu with a serious face and said. Then he led Jianghu out of his room. Originally, they didn't mean to be disrespectful to Jianghu. After Jianghu spent more than $60 million, they were really respectful to Jianghu. After all, the money was in their pockets. They deliberately staggered the time. They let Jianghu leave first, and then went to find other people. Okay. Hearing the waiter's words, Jianghu also nodded softly, and then walked out of the room first. Behind him, Azalina and the two women, Tarantula and Poisonous Spider, followed. The other wolves he bought had not been sent yet. We will send the items you bought to your room soon. The refund will also be sent. Please wait a moment. The waiter respectfully sent Jianghu back to his floor. Outside his room, the waiter said respectfully. After another soft, okay, Jianghu also returned to his room again. Although the sky outside was a little bright at this time, the auction lasted for nearly a night. Jianghu didn't sleep at all, but he was still in good spirits. After returning to his room, he threw his coat on the shelf next to him, and then sat directly on the sofa. Jianghu waved to the newly bought poisonous spiders and tarantulas. They glanced at Azalina, and when they saw her signal, they also sat beside Jianghu, one on the left and one on the right. Jianghu was now indulging in his cravings. Boss, do you want to do them first, or wait until everyone is here? Seeing that Jianghu seemed to be very interested, Azalina asked him. Hearing her words, Jianghu thought for a moment, and temporarily withdrew his hand. Let's wait until everyone is here. Hearing Jianghu's words, the two women here also expressed that they understood. Tarantula stood up first, walked behind Jianghu, and massaged his shoulders, while Poisonous Spider helped Jianghu massage his legs. About half an hour later, there was another knock on the door. Azalina glanced and found that a lot of people were standing at the door at this time, and the leader was Kuluo. After opening the door, Kuluo also saw Jianghu in the room. Mr. Jiang, this is the rest of your money, and these are your goods. As Kuluo's voice fell, he also took out a check from his pocket. After Azalina glanced at it and confirmed that there was no problem, she nodded to Jianghu. Jianghu also motioned her to put the check away first. After confirming that there was no problem with the money, Kuluo waved his hand. Some soldiers behind him walked in with a few women handcuffed behind their backs, but the last woman to come in was not only handcuffed behind her back, but also shackled around her feet. She was the last person Jianghu patted. When these people saw Azalina, they couldn't help but be stunned. It was impossible for them not to know the 12 double-headed eagles at the top of the organization. Originally, they were still thinking about whether they could make a comeback after leaving Elan, but after seeing Azalina, this idea was infinitely reduced. Even the last woman had doubts in her eyes. The goods have been delivered, then I won't disturb you. But Mr. Jiang, I advise you, it's best to subdue them before leaving Elan, because once you leave, we can't guarantee your safety. Seeing that these people had become obedient, Kuluo knew why. He recognized Azalina at first sight. But now Azalina was not a traitor, but a bodyguard of their organization's gold client. Jianghu's $60 million could say that Azalina just escaped, and even if she assassinated the high-ranking officials here, no one would do anything to her. This was the charm of money. Thank you for your advice, I understand. After smiling at Kuluo, Jianghu gestured for him to leave. Kuluo didn't say much. After gently nodding, he left with his people. The moment the door closed, the 5 people who came in couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, then looked at Azalina in surprise. Valentina, Galina, I'm here to save you. Looking at the puzzled eyes of these people in front of her, Azalina only looked at the 2 wolf Slavs, then quickly walked in front of them and hugged them. Although the 2 of them were also a little emotional, their eyes were always vigilantly looking at Jianghu. Let me introduce you, this is Jianghu, a great businessman from Wuxia in the United States. He's also my current boss, but he will also be your boss in the future. Boss, let me introduce you, these 2 are my good sisters since childhood. This is Valentina Baralikia, her surname is a musical instrument, and this is Galina Viscana, her surname is Wrong, which means cat. Perhaps sensing their gazes, Azalina hurriedly explained, but this did not diminish their hostility. Hee, it seems that I do look a little scary. Don't worry, I'm not doing a shady business or opening a secret service organization. I'm just buying you for self-protection. Of course, I need your absolute loyalty. Now what do you think? Tell me. Looking at the vigilant eyes of these 5 people, Jianghu said with a smile. Cattle? Why would a cattle farmer buy us? You can just go to Blackwater and hire some security guards, and it won't cost much. Hearing Jianghu's words, Valentina Baralikia couldn't help but frown and asked with some doubts. In her opinion, what kind of money can a cattle farmer have? Cattle farmers are so extravagant that they can buy people like us? I can only say that the rich are willful, and the most important thing is that this is Azalina's idea. Shrugging, Jianghu said indifferently. If you want us to surrender to you, you have to see your means. Galina also said with a gloomy face at this time. Okay, untie their handcuffs, I haven't exercised for a while. Galina's words meant that she would not surrender to a weakling, but Jianghu had no way to show his financial strength and power at this time, but he could show his strength. Okay, boss. Hearing Jianghu's words, Azalina also smiled. She knew Jianghu's plan. And she also knew Jianghu's combat power. Since her colleagues were not convinced by Jianghu, then let Jianghu show his strength. As long as they were temporarily subdued, they would naturally submit after returning to the United States. After working in this industry for so long, Azalina knew the hearts of these people the best. They were used to the darkness and yearned for the light. When they knew that Jianghu could let them live freely, breathe in the sun, and enjoy the treatment of ordinary people, they would naturally submit. But the premise was that they had to wait until then. Azalina was very clear about these people's hearts. Boss, have mercy. After Jianghu's voice fell, Azalina had already taken the key just given to her by Kuroli and unlocked the handcuffs of the girls in front of her. As the last one, Jianghu unlocked Song Lang's handcuffs. The 5 women had already stood in front of Jianghu. The 4 alpha wolves looked at each other, then finally looked at Song Lang, ready to let her test Jiang Hai's strength first. Seeing the gaze of the 4 alpha wolves, although they were not in the same team, Song Lang still stood up because she also wanted to test Jiang Hai's ability. Seeing her stand up, Jiang Hai also walked to the middle of the hall. Seeing Jiang Hai in position, Song Lang's eyes turned cold, then she made an Israeli self-defense move. She had to admit that the country of Israel was indeed very powerful. It was the country of the Jews. Everyone in the world knew that the Jews were the smartest race in the world, followed by the Wuxia, because they were really good at doing business, but at the same time, they also had their own beliefs. The Jews did not have a country of their own a long time ago. They wandered all over Europe and accumulated huge wealth. Many countries in Europe raised them like pigs. After they accumulated a lot of wealth, they slaughtered the Jews in the area again to get their money. The most famous example was probably Germany in the early stages of World War II. The reason why Germany could quickly recover from the shadow of defeat in World War I and become the starting point of World War II had a lot to do with the wealth they collected from the Jews. In the 40s of the last century, the Jews returned to their holy city, Jerusalem, and began to actively seek opportunities to restore their country. It was not until after Israel's War of Independence in 1948 that the powerful wealth of the Jews began to play a role in the world just after World War II. Compared to other countries in the Middle East, Israel could spend a lot of money to arm its soldiers. It was really armed to the teeth. Among the SLAN countries, Israel had successfully risen to become an independent country in the world. It was also the first country of the Jews since the Christian era. At that time, almost all the tycoons in the world were related to the Jews. Although they still had the nationality of another country, the top technology and the most money allowed Israel to achieve rapid development in an instant. Now, whether it was in terms of armaments or other things, Israel could be said to be one of the top countries in the world. The world's 4 major special departments were also part of Israel. In terms of fighting skills, except for some countries' unique fighting skills, such as Wuxia's hard qigong, basically 90% of countries used Israeli fighting skills. Even if there were other skills, it was the foundation of the foundation. For example, when Bell taught Jiang Hai fighting skills, he also taught this. Looking at the wolf in front of him at this time, Jiang Hai gently waved his hand, indicating that she could attack. Looking at Jiang Hai standing there casually with flaws all over his body, the wolf could not help but frown. In an instant, she stepped forward, her left hand protecting her chest, which was used to block and defend. Her right hand directly punched towards Jiang Hai's face, but in fact, this was just a feint. The real move was her leg that was aimed at Jiang Hai's vital part. However, her movement was easily seen through by Jiang Hai. His body dodged to the left, but his center of gravity did not change. His physical fitness was really too strong. Just like that, he let the opponent's fist hit the air, and the kick also missed. However, the opponent's reaction was not slow. The fist that was originally in front of her was bent in an instant, hitting the palm of her left hand, and the tip of her elbow was also aimed at Jiang Hai's temple at this time. But Jiang Hai chuckled, his foot casually hooked, directly destroying the balance of her other supporting foot, making the wolf fall to the ground in an instant, but she only fell like this. Her leg instantly swung and kicked towards Jiang Hai's head. But at this time, Jiang Hai suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed her leg. In an instant, she became a split and appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Looking at her movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Good flexibility, you can solve a lot of difficult positions. Listening to Jiang Hai's frivolous words, the wolf's other leg swung away in an instant, and then that leg, between Jiang Hai and her, kicked towards Jiang Hai's chin. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai tilted his head and gently dodged, then he instantly hugged the wolf's 2 legs, and then put her body on the sofa before she fell. Originally, this was also an opportunity for the wolf to attack. She could clamp Jiang Hai's head and throw him out. But at this time, Jiang Hai was like a piece of iron, standing in place, and his hands clasping her thighs were like iron rings, making her unable to move at all. In her eyes, Jiang Hai's body was pressed forward, and then his face was less than 5 centimeters away from hers. Both of them could even feel each other's breath. You lost. However, Jiang Hai didn't take a step forward at this time, but said to her with a smile. However, just as Jiang Hai's voice fell, he suddenly let go of the wolf's legs and retreated. This was because the Germanic alpha wolf was about to attack. If Jiang Hai didn't dodge, then he would have been kicked by the wolf. Another one who refuses to accept it? After dodging, Jiang Hai looked at the Germanic woman, chuckled, and waved his hand again. But this time, the Germanic woman didn't rush forward, but instead, she winked at the other three. Chapter 739. None of the women in this organization are stupid. It's impossible for Hungarians to be brainless here. They are very clear about their own level. Admittedly, they are stronger than the Wolfzong, but not to the extent that they can crush her at will. They also know this Wolfzong's level. Although she's not the best, she's still weaker than them. But she would definitely not be too weak. If they were to look at it based on strength, it would be impossible for them to take her down with pure force without 180 moves. But what about Jiang Hai? They are not Wolfzong, and even if they are, it's impossible for them to be stronger than Jiang Hai. It's impossible for them to win one-on-one, but if they besiege him, there's still a slight chance of winning. Of course, if they want to kill Jiang Hai, they have many ways, such as poisoning him. Poisonous Spider and Tarantula, who were sitting next to Jiang Hai, also stood up at this time. To be honest, they didn't think that Jiang Hai's combat power would be so strong. They didn't know what to do now, so they just stood there and looked at him. Do you mind if we do it together? Seeing the gaze of this Germanic woman, Valentina, who was just introduced, was the first to step forward and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face. Jiang Hai just smiled and shrugged indifferently. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, the remaining Wuxia woman also came over, and finally the one-to-one wolf named Galina Vasilkaya also came out. The four of them slowly surrounded Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai's face also became serious. Ah! As the four of them stood in position, the Germanic woman shouted. Jiang Hai turned his head to look at her, but he found that she didn't attack him. At the same time, a gust of wind blew past his head. Jiang Hai knew that this was Valentina's attack. He casually grabbed Valentina's foot with his left hand, but this attack was also a signal. These women instantly launched their attacks, punches, and kicks directly towards Jiang Hai. Looking at the unavoidable and overwhelming attack in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and pulled Valentina, who was about to kick Jiang Hai with her other foot, over. Jiang Hai used her as a shield and swung her directly. The other three people looked at Valentine Jingna, who was swung over, and couldn't help but exclaim secretly. Their hands and feet that were originally attacking couldn't help but be a little flustered. At this moment, Jiang Hai also instantly hugged Valentine Jingna's dazed body and whispered in her ear, "You lost." Then he licked her earlobe mischievously and threw her on the sofa. At the same time, Jiang Hai stomped his feet and instantly crashed into the three people in front of him. He grabbed the Wuxia woman's collar and gently threw her over his shoulder, throwing her to the ground. Then he grabbed the Germanic's hair and pulled her into his arms. His hands were firmly clasped on her hands. Looking at her stubborn eyes, Jiang Hai kissed her gently on the lips. "You also lost." After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he threw the Germanic on the sofa and dodged Gazina's attack. With a pull of his hand, he pulled the Chinese woman who just got up. With a chuckle, he grabbed her breasts and threw her on the sofa. After all, they were just comparing notes. Jiang Hai was showing his strength, not a death match. Therefore, after the three people were defeated, they didn't rush up again. Although Jiang Hai's action just now made them feel a little ashamed, their identity and their bodies were originally Jiang Hai's. It was like if a man touched a woman on the street, the most likely outcome would be a slap. Jiang Hai's words were like a man touching a woman on the street. The most likely outcome would be a slap. However, if they were in an ancient palace, if the emperor touched a palace maid, the palace maid wouldn't resist. Even if they were shy, they wouldn't resist. Now, they have this kind of feeling. Looking at Jianghu and Jialina in front of them, they were also waiting for something. You really have some skills. Seeing Jianghu easily defeat the three wolves, although Jialina is much stronger than them, she couldn't help but sigh. But in fact, the difference in strength between the two was not as big as they imagined. Not to mention, it was a 1-on-4 battle just now, but now it was a 1-on-1 battle. It's okay, let's end this game quickly. Listening to Gazina's words, Jianghu chuckled, then in an instant, his body rushed forward. Gazing at the rushing Jianghu, Gazina subconsciously kicked him, but Jianghu moved at high speed and dodged her kick. At the same time, he flashed in front of her and directly clasped her leg with one hand and grabbed her hands with the other, making her stand in place with one leg. Are you convinced now? Looking at Gazina in front of him, Jianghu said with a smile. I'm not convinced. Hearing Jianghu's words, Gazina, who was in front of him, suddenly raised her head and bumped into Jianghu. However, Jianghu didn't retreat. He also hit Jialina's head with a hammer. After a loud bang, Jialina felt that her head was quite dizzy. She saw stars in front of her eyes. Her control over her body also dropped in an instant. Looking at Jialina, who had lost control of her body, Jianghu smiled and instantly carried her in his arms. He then strode back to his room. After spending so much money on these people, Jianghu wasn't just looking for people to develop his eyesight or people to protect him. They were also quite tempting to Jianghu. Looking at Jianghu carrying Gazina into the room, the other women were a little hesitant, but seeing that Azalina didn't say anything to stop them, they didn't know what to say. They just stood there and watched Jianghu throw Gazina on the bed, then they heard the sound of cloth being torn. After Gazina groaned, there was no other sound in the room, only the sound of flesh hitting flesh could be heard. What are you waiting for? Don't wait for me to undress you personally. Looking at the scene in the room, the people outside were somewhat hesitant. Azalina looked at them, couldn't help but smile, and said lightly. As soon as Azalina's words fell, the poisonous spider bought by Jianghu immediately took off her clothes, then walked in naked and hugged Jianghu from behind. Looking at her action, the tarantula also walked in. After the two tarantulas went in, the Germanic hesitated for a moment, then took off her clothes and followed them in. She knew that this day would come sooner or later, and most importantly, Jianghu also proved his strength, which was not something they could compare with. Moreover, as Azalina said, they would go to the United States, and Jianghu would give them freedom, but the premise was that they had to go to the United States. Therefore, the Germanic bit her lips gently and walked in. After she went in, the rest of the people looked at each other and took off their clothes together. The Wuxia woman walked into the room first, and the remaining Valentina looked back at Azalina. Don't worry, I won't harm you. Looking at Valentina's eyes, Azalina also whispered in Russian. Hearing Azalina's words, Valentina couldn't help but nod, then followed her into the room. What happened next didn't need to be described too much, and it couldn't be described. Jianghu didn't leave the room for the rest of the day, and he didn't even eat. Not only did he not eat, but the others also didn't eat. He now needed to subdue these women. A day later, when the sun once again shone in Jianghu's room, the scene at this time was indeed easy to make people malnourished. Jianghu's head was resting on the tarantula's upper body, and his hands were hugging the Wuxia woman and Valentina. The wolf and the Germanic were hugging Jianghu's legs, the tarantula was hugging Jianghu's neck, and the wildest Galena was still lying on Jianghu's body. As the sun shone in, she was the first to open her eyes in a daze. When she saw Jianghu in front of her, and this scene, she couldn't help but frown, and at the same time clenched her hands tightly. Facing Jianghu in front of her, who almost took away her precious thing by force, she was really angry. She really wanted to strangle Jianghu, but she knew that she probably had no chance. Yesterday, she clearly saw Jianghu's physical fitness. This strength was far from what she could compare with. Unless she poisoned him or used a weapon, otherwise, she would hardly be a threat to Jianghu. Thinking of this, Galina couldn't help but feel a little powerless. To be honest, the reason why she became strong and became the current leader of the team was that she wanted to control her own destiny, especially after Azalina escaped. But now, she felt that her destiny seemed to be getting farther and farther away. She couldn't even protect herself, let alone control her own destiny. Thinking of this, Galina only felt a strong sense of powerlessness. Feeling the indescribable thing that Jianghu still left in her body, she gritted her teeth, gently supported her body, and withdrew the indescribable thing from her body. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she felt that her feet were weak. Yesterday, she couldn't count how many times Jianghu had looked for her. Because her consciousness had long been blurred, but looking at her weak footsteps, the number of times was definitely not small. Looking at the ugly existence of Jianghu, she bitterly pulled a bath towel and wrapped it around her body, then walked out while holding the wall. When she came out, she found that Azalina was sitting on the sofa in the living room at this time, playing on the computer there. Seeing her come out, Azalina didn't stop working, but patted the position next to her. Looking at Azalina, Galina's mood was slightly better, and she slowly walked over and sat next to her. "How does it feel to be a woman in the morning?" Without looking at Galina, Azalina said with a smile. "Not very good." Shaking her head, Galina said with a look of displeasure. "Body or soul?" Hearing her words, Azalina also stopped the movement of her hands and looked at her with a smile. "Both are not good." Hearing her words, Galina curled her lips. To be honest, she really felt very bad. It seems that Jianghu is really harsh on you, little wild horse. It seems that he really likes you, otherwise, he wouldn't be so harsh on you. TSK, I'm a little envious of you." Azalina gently lifted the towel with her fingertips, glanced at the little bun that was swollen like a bun, and said to her with a smile. "Tisk, hateful and narrow-minded man." Galina said with a look of displeasure when she heard Azalina's words. "It's all right. After all, he's our man in the future, and he's also our master. You have to learn how to please him. I saw him hugging you to sleep yesterday. It seems that he's very interested in you." Hearing her words, Azalina also said with a smile. "Who wants him to be interested in me, that hateful bastard?" Hearing what Azalina said, Galina gritted her teeth and said. "Whether you want it or not, this is our home in the future. Believe me, Jianghu is really a good home. This is the information I have compiled about him and the situation of the manor. You get up first, you can take a look first. Our new home is really good." Looking at Galina, Azalina said with a smile, then took the laptop in front of her. After taking the laptop, Galina also looked at it doubtfully. What she mainly watched was the videos of Jianghu's manor, which were all taken from the air. Chili specifically asked Jianghu to take the videos in order to promote Jianghu's manor in her restaurant in the capital. Looking at the endless grassland in front of her and the rippling sea, Galina's eyes couldn't help but be a little intoxicated. Can I live here in the future? Free to bask in the sun, free to breathe the fresh air. Looking at the picture in front of her, she seemed to be asking Azalina, but also seemed to be asking herself. They were trained as humanoid weapons from an early age. This is the human character. The more they lack, the more they desire it. They lack freedom from an early age, so naturally they are extremely eager for freedom. But in the end, they still find that freedom is still far from their own. But at this time, when she accepts her fate, having such freedom within the framework may be a good choice. In the future, live with me. In a while, when Jianghu gets up, you have to perform well. Seeing Galina's hesitation, Azalina also smiled and said slowly. Chapter 740. Hiss. Just when Jialina was at a loss, Jianghu also grinned and walked out of the room in a bathrobe, but when he walked, his legs unconsciously stretched outwards. Hearing Jianghu's voice, Jialina quickly put the computer back on the table. Then she pretended to sit there indifferently. Looking at her, Azalina couldn't help but laugh, but she didn't point it out. Turning her head and seeing Jianghai's actions, Azalina couldn't help but laugh even more happily. This guy is really funny. How is it? Do you feel okay? Looking at Jianghai, who was stretching his legs a little, Azalina asked him. Hiss, I can't stand it anymore. Shaking his head, Jianghai said with some confusion. To be honest, with Jianghai's physical fitness, he can easily handle 4 people. 3 or 4 was a piece of cake for him. Ever since his physical fitness had reached 4 times the human limit, he had naturally become stronger in this aspect. However, no matter how strong a bull was, there would be a day when it would be exhausted to death. Just like now. It's okay, take a good rest. Listening to Jianghai's words, Azalina comforted him, then said to him. Hearing Azalina still say that it's okay, Jianghai couldn't help but laugh a little, but he shook his head. You guys sit down first, I'll go downstairs to buy breakfast for you. Jialina, take care of the boss. Looking at Jianghai walking over, Azalina said, then picked up her coat and went downstairs to the restaurant to buy some breakfast. After Jianghai watched her go out, he walked into the big bathroom next to him, washed up, and returned to the living room. Looking at Jialina, who was still sitting in front of him, Jianghai couldn't help but walk over and sit directly next to her. Feeling Jianghai's movements, Jialina couldn't help but want to move to the side. After all, she was still not used to Jianghai sitting next to her. But before she could move, Jianghai had already picked her up and put her on his lap. Sitting on Jianghai's lap, Jialina's eyes flashed, but she didn't speak. Her body was also stiff. She knew that she was not Jianghai's opponent in a direct confrontation. Considering that Jianghai is now her master, and what happened yesterday, she didn't know what kind of emotions to use to face Jianghai. Hatred? Some. Fear? There were also some. Fear? Well, there is also some yearning. After reading the information compiled by Azalina just now, she also had some. These things made her not know how to face Jianghai. Don't worry too much. I don't have any bad habits, and I'm not a person who walks on the edge of a knife. I'm just a very ordinary person who raises cattle. Oh, now I also raise fish and brew wine. In short, I'm just a farmer, so you don't need to be too afraid of me. Feeling Jialina in his arms, her body trembling, Jianghai also said softly. Hearing Jianghai's words, Jialina glanced at him. She didn't know whether Jianghai's words were credible or not, but at least on the surface, she still knew that Jianghai had no malice towards her. I know it will take a while to change you, but I'm still very patient. Feeling that her body was no longer trembling so obviously, Jianghai also gently moved the hands around her waist. This time, she didn't mean to refuse Jianghai. When they climbed to the top, Jialina didn't say anything and still sat there calmly. But when they touched the bottom, her body couldn't help but tremble, and Jianghai also felt that something seemed to be wrong. I'm really sorry, I didn't expect it to be so heavy. Feeling her body trembling, Jianghai also suddenly understood. In fact, with Jianghai's aura, there was no problem with treating these, but the problem was that because these women hadn't really accepted him yet, Jianghai didn't show his most magical scene in front of them, so they could only rely on themselves. Anyway, you are the master, you have the final say. Hearing Jianghai's words, Jialina's heart felt a little better. At least, Jianghai apologized to her. This was a good start, but she still said stubbornly. Hearing her words, Jianghai also smiled, then his hands wrapped around her waist again, and he casually turned on the TV to watch. Maybe it was because people got up one after another, or maybe it was because the sound of the TV came into the room. About half an hour later, the other women in the room also left the room, but looking at their walking posture, they were more or less affected. When they saw Jianghai and the other two sitting on the sofa, they all hesitated, but Poisonous Spider was the first to react. She smiled and sat next to Jianghai. Looking at her movements, the other women also looked at each other and then sat on the sofa. For a while, this big sofa was crowded at this time, but feeling these women around him, Jianghu was quite happy. After a while, Azalina also came back with breakfast. Yesterday, they didn't eat anything all day, and so did Jianghu. So after breakfast was served, Jianghu and the others quickly ate. Obviously, Azalina also thought about this problem, so she bought a lot of breakfast. After eating breakfast, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe it was because there wasn't so much pressure, they also relaxed a lot. At this time, Jianghu, who had been holding Jialina, clapped his hands, attracting everyone's attention. My name is Jianghu, 28 years old, Wuxia, and now living in Winthrop, Massachusetts, USA. I opened a manor, and the main profitable projects are beef cattle, fishing, and wine. Now, I can be regarded as your employer. Your main duty is to protect my safety and inquire about some useful information for me. As for her, she will be your commander. Seeing everyone looking at him, Jianghu also said loudly. Hearing Jianghu's words, Azalina also smiled. It's her turn. My name is Azalina Vicabrio. I used to be in this organization, codenamed Double-Headed Eagle 105. Now, I am Mr. Jianghu's bodyguard, and the person who will be in charge of you. Looking at the women in front of her, Azalina said with a smile. Let's introduce ourselves one by one. After introducing herself, Azalina looked at the tarantula standing on the side and said to her, You're a tarantula. My name is Rayla Scarter, a Samoan, an orphan, adopted by the organization since I was a child. I only remember my name and my mission, but if you are my family in the future, then I will fight for my family. Under Azalina's gaze, the smallest girl couldn't help but say a very explosive sentence. Samoans are worthy of being a fighting race, even their words are different. After she finished speaking, Azalina also pointed to the tarantula, the 108 that Jianghu is very optimistic about. Yesterday, she suffered the most besides Galina, but it has to be admitted that her physical fitness is much better than Galina's. Maybe she was born with this talent. At this time, among these people, her influence was the lowest. She sat beside Jianghu, and from time to time, she used her weapon to rub Jianghu's arm. If Jianghu is interested, it seems that she can go to the battlefield at any time. Seeing that Azalina was looking at him, the poisonous spider gently cleared his throat, and then began to speak slowly. My name is Huali Shelley, Ulan, but not an East Slav, but a Moldovan. In the future, please forgive me if I don't do well. After all, it was the first time Huali Shelley came here, so she said with a smile. My name is Belyak Trotsky, an East Slav. I am an orphan, and I don't have my own name. This name was given to me by a sister in the organization when I was young. After Huali Shelley finished speaking, the tarantula didn't need Azalina to say anything, but when she said it, there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. They didn't have a home since they were young, and it was indeed very sad. Belyak Trotsky, what does that mean? After hearing this name, everyone was a little depressed. Jianghu couldn't help but whisper to Galina who was in his arms. He really didn't understand these things, and he didn't understand Soviet words. Fortunately, these girls received language education from a young age, and at least 3 languages. English was the most important one. Belyak means white rabbit, and Trotsky means 3 Saints Church. These are very common names and surnames in our organization. Because we were too young when we came here, some of us remembered our own names, but most of us didn't. The instructors here also wouldn't be kind enough to give us nice names, so they basically gave us names based on place names or animals. After all, after we leave the mission, all we have is a code name. Hearing Jianghu's doubts, Galina couldn't help but say with some sadness. Jianghu didn't know what to say, but he didn't know what to say. But you can call yourselves by your names in the future. As for code names and whatnot, just let them go with the wind. White Rabbit, well, it really suits you. You are so white. Listening to Jialina's sad words, Jianghu's heart tightened, but he knew that what he had to do now was to wash away this sad feeling. So he took the initiative to stretch out his hand and touched Jiaolina's upper body. Jiaolina was as surprised as a little rabbit, so he said what he just said. Jiaolina looked at him with a surprised expression. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the other girls couldn't help but giggle, and Belyak also felt a little shy, but at least the sad feeling just now had disappeared at this time. My name is Aless Sarah, German, from Germany. Seeing that the atmosphere had eased, the German girl couldn't help but say. Fortunately, Jiang Hai knew the situation of the Germans. His manners. Connor Murphy was such a person. Usually, even if you hit him 3 times with a stick, he might not even be able to make a fart out of him. He looked at everyone with a cold gaze. This was also the habit of the Germans. To be exact, it was the habit of the Germans. Whatever they did, they were very serious. Sometimes, this seriousness was reflected in the fact that they did not smile. When they introduced themselves, they would also be very brief and powerful. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai knew that she was such a person, and the others were also very familiar with her. Compared to Azalina, who had ascended to the double-headed eagle in her early years, it was obvious that the remaining people were still very familiar with Aleppo. My name is Du Ning, from Wuxia. As for what happened to me when I was young, I don't know where I came from, but I have never forgotten Chinese. After Aless Sarah finished introducing herself, the Wuxia girl introduced herself. But it could be seen that she was not quite used to her identity now, especially when she was with so many women and served Jiang Hai. This made her shy and a little overwhelmed. It could be seen that deep down, she was still a very traditional woman. But now, with her identity, she had to accept these things. Looking at her, Jiang Hai waved at her. After all, they were from the same hometown, so Jiang Hai naturally had to take care of her. Seeing Jiang Hai waving at her, Du Ning hesitated for a moment, then walked to Jiang Hai and sat on the other side of Jiang Hai. Feeling Jiang Hai's hands moving all over her body, her face turned red, but she did not stop him. My name is Valentina Aladikea. Like Belyak, I'm an orphan, but I still remember that my name is Valentina. My luck is pretty good. At this time, one of the 2 women who had introduced herself yesterday also introduced herself. My name is Galina Vasilea, I'm also an orphan. Only Galina, who was sitting in his arms, was left. After hesitating for a moment, she also said seriously, but she also said very little. After listening to everyone's introduction, Jiang Hai also smiled. Alright, we're all family now. Indeed, in my eyes, you're not tools or objects. You're living people and my family. It's just that you have different responsibilities. Now that I'm the head of this family, I have to make you feel the warmth of a family. If you have anything you want or a place you want to go, just tell me. I'll be satisfied with your forgiveness. When you're all relieved, we'll return to Winthrop. Looking at the girls in front of him who had already finished introducing themselves, Jiang Hai smiled and asked. What are you talking about? You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.